Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining. This is not a regular time for a class, but nothing is regular these days, so we do irregular. In any case, this is a special class. It's the Parsha My Life class for this week, Parshas Kairach. I don't think I'm going to touch too much on the Parsha. 1 second, is there a tissue over there? It's not, if you can get me that, because this pen is leaking. Or better, you know what, I don't need this pen. Just throw this pen out. Thank you, Solomon. Okay, so this class is a Parshas Korach, but we're not going to deal too much with the Parsha, although maybe a little inspiration from the Parsha. But primarily, I am delivering this class in connection to two powerful days. One was yesterday, which was Chav Ches Nisan, Kayach Sivan, the 28th day of Sivan, and in relationship to another powerful day, which is going to be this Shabbos, this coming Shabbos, Gimel Tammuz. But these 2 days are very, very significant to Chabad Hasidim. For those who might not be, those that are not necessarily, don't have all that Hasidic knowledge, let me quickly bring you up to speed. The 28th of Sivan is the day that the Lubavitcher Rebbe and his wife, Rabbi Chaim Mushka, set foot on the soil of the United States of America 81 years ago, 1941, escaping the blazing fires of the Holocaust back in Europe. As I mentioned yesterday in the short video, this is by tremendously divine providence, because the Rebbe set foot on the United States the very same day when he went to pick up his mother, who was back still in Europe. 7 years later, or 6 years later, the Rebbe came with his mom, and they arrived again on the 28th of Sivan. So this is like off the charts divine providence, and the Rebbe spoke about it. So the 28th of Sivan is an awesome day, a day that when the Rebbe speaks about it in his talk, the Rebbe gives it cosmic significance in terms of the realization of the purpose of creation and the realization of the purpose of the world. In as much as the Rebbe believed and spoke and encourages us to think and to know and to understand that his life is intertwined with our lives, and both of our lives, us and him together, play a major role in completing the whole purpose of all of creation. So that is the 28th of Sivan that we commemorated yesterday. When we move on to Gimel Tammuz, which is the Shabbos, which is the 28th Gimel Tammuz since Tavshin Nun Dalet. That day was a very, very dark day for the Jewish people, and it remains a confusing day to those, to many Lubavitchers and so on and so forth, are comfortable with saying it's the day of the Rebbe's yahrzeit or the Rebbe's passing and so on and so forth. Many Lubavitchers don't have that comfort. I, amongst them, cannot bring those words out of my mouth in Lula or yahrzeit, for reasons that you will probably get to appreciate in the discussion that we have today. Whatever it is, it was a day definitely that the Rebbe's physical appearance in this world was suspended, let's just say temporarily, till Be'ezus Hashem we are reunited. So when I say physical, I also meant physical appearance. That means what we can see. So, I mean, judging of what we can see, yes, there's an absence of the physical appearance of the Rebbe for the last 28 years on Gimel Tammuz. Now, whether it's celebrated as a yahrzeit, whether it's celebrated not as a yahrzeit, wherever one standing in their Hiskashrus and bond and connection, and I'm not chas v'shalom recommending any which way is better. It's just everybody has different approaches to the day. It's a day shrouded still in confusion. Whichever way of looking at it, it's a significant day, and it's a day that has to be commemorated, celebrated. It's, even if a person doesn't want to see it as in a regular yahrzeit, in the conventional sense of it, it's still a day that needs to be a day of great focus and definitely devoted to the culmination and the bringing of Mashiach. There is no question about that. Or on the other hand, if you see it as a yahrzeit as well, then you're very inspired by the Rebbe and by the Rebbe's drive. And what is the Rebbe's drive? To complete the task and bring the Geula. So either way, one should be inspired, driven to Geula, to Mashiach, and so on and so forth. So as we stand in between these two ginormous days, I would like to dwell on some pretty intense stuff. First of all, I would recommend for those of you who are listening to this class, take a peek at my class that I gave yesterday, titled SCOTUS, something to do with the Supreme Court reversal and the fall of the collapse of the Israeli government. We spoke some phenomenal stuff yesterday that I think you'll find interesting, and connecting it to the awesomeness of the day, I think it will add some meaning to the class that we're having today. What I primarily am focusing on today is, I will come to in a moment, the intensity of it. But first I want to say that the Rebbe gave two talks. Lubavitcher Rebbe gave two talks in the last year that we merited to hear him speaking to us at this time of the year, which is in the year 51. Tav Shin Nun Aleph. It corresponds to the year 1991 in the month of June, July. This is the time that May, June, July, where these sichos were being spoken. I don't have the exact accurate date of these two talks. These were back-to-back talks. It's printed in this phenomenal book called Sefer HaSichos, Tav Shin Nun Aleph. Some of you might be familiar that these talks are also referred to as the Hamalchus. So there are two talks that were given back-to-back. One was on the 28th of Sivan, and the other one was on Gimel Tammuz. And they both convey the essence of those days in a phenomenal way. But what's so amazing is that the character of the two talks are totally conflicting, or total opposites. In the talk of the 28th of Sivan, which literally is off the charts spectacular, the Rebbe is talking about the power, the aggressive power of Mashiach Decoded. That's what the Rebbe is talking about. That the Rebbe is talking about, obviously, the day that he came to America, and he's talking about how that day when he sets foot in America is related to the day of the 28th of Sivan. 28 is the power called Koach, and Sivan is Torah. Koach means power. 28 in Hebrew is Koach, and Koach means power. So it's the power of the Torah. So the Rebbe says, what's the power of the Torah? The power of the Torah is to transform the world. And how to transform the world, even the lowest parts of the world, even that which is the most resistant to God. And the Rebbe goes on to explain how America is on the other side of the world where the Torah was given. So therefore it constitutes the lower part of creation, the part of the world that is most rebellious and most non-compliant with God. And the power of the 28th of Sivan is to conquer even the United States of America. So the Rebbe says, isn't that interesting? I'm paraphrasing, but I'm giving a class over here, and I'm trying to make it interesting to everybody listening. So I am paraphrasing. I'm not sticking. I will, Be'ez Hashem, later in the class, try to quote to you very, very clear and concise quotations. But for now, this is just a paraphrase, what the Rebbe is basically saying, and that's the idea of me coming to the United States of America, because him, as later becoming the seventh, when he came to the United States, he was already the son-in-law of the previous Rebbe, and there he began to do his work in the various different organizations that the previous Rebbe, his father-in-law of saintly memory, had appointed him to. But eventually the Rebbe ascended to the mantle of leadership as the seventh Chabad Rebbe, and the rest is history. He transformed the entire world and continues to transform the world to this very day, for goodness, for holiness, and for godliness. So the Rebbe says that is a major step, of the final step of the Torah conquering the world. And as we will see, the Rebbe very much is seeing that as in a very Mashiach Decoded light. That the koach of the Torah, when the Torah releases its full power, actualizes its potential, what do you get in the end? You get a sublimated world. And what's a sublimated world? The godly world of Mashiach. So therefore, the Rebbe says that day is the power to conclude the work of the Torah, and Mashiach's power dominating over all of creation, all over the world. So in yesterday's class, I connected it to the fact that the ultimate domination is how does Mashiach dominate? We'll soon see it. It's connected to the next talk in a way where he doesn't force his view on everybody, but he forces everybody. He compels all the minds to eventually think like him. not by forcing it like kind of coercion from above, but by his holiness and godliness and spiritual light. And really, what's Mashiach? He's not coercing anything, he's unearthing everything. There's a divine truth to existence, and that divine truth is sometimes concealed and blocked by foreign entities that conceal and cover it. So Torah comes to help unearth truth and reveal the innate inner godliness, and thereby people make the right choice. So we're talking about the reversal of Roe versus Wade, which was such an incredible reversal for the sake of godliness, the sanctity of life, and so on and so forth. Related, but again, that's not the subject of today's class. You can look at that class yesterday for further understanding of the connection. Now, that's one talk. So again, that talk basically is indicating Mashiach's muscle power. Mashiach is muscle man. He's unbelievably powerful to transform the world. He goes down into the lowest of the low and flips the world over from the bottom up. That's the idea. Then, back to back, the next talk is the talk on Gimel Tammuz. Now, it's amazing. That's the last time the Rebbe talks about Gimel Tammuz. And in such a prophetic way, there's nothing else to say but that it was pure prophecy. If we learn the talk, if we keep the talks on the bookshelves and we try to, make our own chetlach or little Torah about what the Gimel Tammuz is, it's one thing. But I think it's black on white. If you read the Rebbe's last talk on Gimel Tammuz, it becomes very clear that the Rebbe himself defines the nature of the day. First of all, he makes a stunning statement about the day. He says that, now let's understand something. Gimel Tammuz was a important day on the Chabad calendar before 1994, when we're dealing with our Gimel Tammuz the way we see it today. That confusing time that I spoke about before. Gimel Tammuz was a holiday in Lubavitch, connected to it wasn't just a holiday. It is still considered the beginning of liberation, the beginning of the redemption. The Rebbe would use the same words that are used regarding the ultimate and complete redemption, the messianic redemption, when Mashiach comes and redeems the entire world. The Rebbe used those same words both regarding his great-great-great-grandfather, the Alter Rebbe Zalman of Liadi, when he was released, and his victory, and he can go ahead and spread the teachings of Chassidus to the world. The Rebbe calls it Chag HaGeula. And the Rebbe even calls the entire month of Kislev Chodesh HaGeula, the month of redemption, which generally Jews traditionally have only referred to Chodesh HaGeula as Nisan, the Yom Tov of the holiday of Passover. But yet the Lubavitcher Rebbe is comfortable and teaches us that it applies even to the month of Kislev. Now, the other Chag HaGeula in Chabad is on Tammuz, coming up. That's the 12th day of Tammuz, the 13th day of Tammuz, 2 days, which we celebrate as a great holiday. We don't say Tachanun. Farbrengens and kind of celebrations are done across the entire Chabad world, because it's the day the previous Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, the previous Chabad Rebbe, the Rebbe's father-in-law was freed from his incarceration in Russia by the Soviets for his spreading of Judaism. So that happened on the 12th of Tammuz. A few days earlier, like a week earlier, 7-8 days earlier, on the 3rd of Tammuz, was when they liberated the Frierdiker Rebbe from the jail where they were holding him. I think in Leningrad, he was held, and he was in a prison, and they released him from jail, but they sent him off for a 3-year conviction, for a 3-year exile. So the Rebbe, interestingly, right in the beginning of that talk, says something about the day. He says, Gimel Tammuz was a confusing day in the beginning, because on the one hand, it was a day that was very dark, because the Rebbe was being sent to prison. It was on the other hand, it was already good that year already. In the year 1927, it was already considered somewhat of a happy day of relief, because the Rebbe was let out of jail, which was much worse for him. But it was kind of, at that moment, they didn't know, because they thought the Rebbe would, God forbid, be sent for 3 years, and not everybody came home. The Rebbe's father himself passed away because of his suffering. The Rebbe's own father, who wasn't the Rebbe, but again, the Rebbe's father-in-law is the Rebbe. The Rebbe's father, Rabbi Yitzchak, passed away as a result of the suffering he had during an exile. So these exiles were no picnic. There were no vacation. They were and therefore it was a very dark day. So the Rebbe says it was kind of a confusing day, to celebrate or not to celebrate, to break out l'chaim or not to do so. It was a very bittersweet day. But the Rebbe said a week later, it was retroactively realized that Gimel Tammuz is the beginning of the redemption. What is he talking about? The beginning of the redemption, his father-in-law's redemption. Wow. Now, so as it's very clear from the talk, without even going. If you go further, it's a million times more clear. But that's not my subject today. So I can go into this for 20 minutes, and I don't want to go there because I want to stick to the more important business right now. I mean, when I say more important, I mean to our particular subject, and that is. But what's clear from here is that the Rebbe says we're dealing with a day that has a certain significance now, but then later we find out that it meant something different. And what does that mean? And how does it turn around? It turns around where you realize that this day was really a day of, not a day of darkness, but a day of very bright light. It was the beginning stage of a complete redemption. So it's clear that the Rebbe is telling us regarding the Gimel Tammuz, of which he himself was going to have 3 years later, and his own Gimel Tammuz, which seems to be a day where the Geula seems to hit a bump in the road. Because at the time when the Rebbe was physically with us, everybody believed that the Rebbe would be the one who would physically take us to the redemption. And then when the Rebbe had this, when Gimel Tammuz happened, and the Rebbe was physical presence, not here with us in our sense that we can see him, so that seems to be antithetical to redemption. And for many Hasidim even, it caused the redemption dreams to be dashed, those dreams, and people fell into a morbid depression and a very deep sadness. So thank God, Baruch Hashem, Chassidim have stood up and conquered the world and continued doing amazing stuff, but it was very, very difficult. And for many Chassidim, obviously, there's it's a heavy day. As much as we try to make it a very positive day, it's a very heavy day. Yet the Rebbe is telling us that, hold it. It looks like that now, but a day will come when it will turn around and say, ooh. But now let me continue. What does the Rebbe say? What's the gist? What's the main theme and main idea? It's the opposite idea that he said a few days earlier, that Chav Ches Sivan is the day that Mashiach takes full control over the world, dominates the world, transforms the world, and no one can resist him. That's the point. No one can stop him. He's unstoppable. On this day, a few days later, the Rebbe is talking again. And you know what he says? He says Mashiach slows down. The idea of Gimel Tammuz, the Rebbe explains, is the idea that Mashiach restrains his powers, kind of takes a step back, goes into the shadows and into the background. And the reason for that is, as the Rebbe explains, is because Mashiach wants and needs the world to catch up with him. In other words, Mashiach does not want to coerce and force the world into a godly state, because Mashiach needs to work with the world. Mashiach has to elevate nature, not eliminate nature. So yes, there is miracles. Yes, there is spectacular divine assistance. And yet there is incredible godly, infusion that's taking place continuously, coming from Mashiach and coming from all this messianic energy that's coming to the world. Yet it has to happen in a way that's very gentle, where there is the power of Mashiach is purposely veiled and covered and concealed to allow for a process to take place, which means that we need to absorb it, internalize it. It can't be pushed on us from above. It needs to be, we need to become partners. Nature has to become partners. Humanity has to become partners. We all have to join. And that's how the Rebbe explains the concept of Gimel Tammuz from many, many angles. So what do you see over here? These conflicting, powerful tzichas, back to back. I never noticed it until this year. Baruch Hashem, Hashem has given me the zchus to be teaching particularly these talks a lot. So when you'll read them again and again and again, every time it blows my mind. But the first time I noticed the opposite nature of the two talks. On the 28th of Sivan, it's how Mashiach is unstoppable. His force is like so, it will cut through the stone, cut through the fiercest steel resistance. But at the same time, the next talk, how Mashiach slows down and allows for a process to take place. Now, it's a paradox. Of course, it's a paradox. Everything about God is paradoxical, and everything about Mashiach is paradoxical. The reason is because Mashiach when we say everything about God is paradoxical, primarily when we're talking about what's called in Hasidus Atzmos. Atzmos means the essence of Hashem. When we're talking about divine revelations, emanations, over there, it has certain rules and regulations, and it works within a certain patterns. It's either like this or like this. It's not usually both. But when God himself gets involved, which is the essence of Hashem, that's when the paradoxes happen. That's when the impossibilities happen. You have yes and no at the same time. You have literally light and darkness at the same time. Revelation and concealment at the same time. It's amazing. So, and that's primarily related to the Messianic revelation, Mashiach's revelation, because Mashiach is the way the Rebbe, and it's explained in Hasidus, Mashiach is the uncovering and the revealing of God's very, very essence. And that's why the paradox is coming. What we can say is, again, I didn't see this, it's my own thought today in the morning thinking about this class, that the reason why on the 28th day of Sivan, the Rebbe talks about Mashiach's the aggressive energy of Mashiach, the power of Mashiach and the full punch of Mashiach. And in Gimel Tammuz, the Rebbe speaks about Mashiach in a restrictive and a retractive way. It's almost like this is a power of chesed. Chesed means revelation, and this is a power of gevura, of holding back. The reason for that is because let's look at the day of when he's speaking. On the 28th of Sivan, it's the month of Sivan. Sivan is the third month, and Tammuz is the fourth month. So this talk was given in the month of Sivan, and the other talk was given in the month of Tammuz. What's the difference between Sivan and Tammuz? Sivan is number 3, and Tammuz is number 4. What's the difference between the two numbers of 3 and 4? So Kabbalistically, mystically, we learn, or it's actually stated in the Talmud. Now you don't have to go to Kabbolah. The Talmud says that the Hebrew letter for number 3 is Gimel, and the Hebrew letter for number 4 is Daled. And what does the Gimel mean? Gimel means the influencer. Gimel, from the word Gemilat Chasadim, the kind givingness of the giver. And Daled means the receptacle of the receiver. And so Daled means the poor one, the one who doesn't have anything, that's the receiver. There's a giver and there's a receiver. So God, for instance, is the Gimel, and the creation is the Daled. Mashiach himself is the Gimel in this context, and the people, us, are the Daled. We are the receivers. So therefore, on the 28th, and that's why when God gives the Torah, that's God's infusion. That's God giving. So when does the Torah give into the world? When does Hashem give the Torah? That's in the third month, in the month of Gimel, in the month of the giver. He's giving the Torah. And when do we start unpacking the Torah and processing the Torah, absorbing it? That really starts in the next month, which is the month of Tammuz. That's our space, the world space. Our development, our ability to receive, take it in. So therefore, hence the difference. On the 28th of Sivan, which again, the 28 means what? The power of, 28 is the number of power. So we're talking about the power of the giver, the power of the energies coming from above, including the messianic flow of Mashiach through Mashiach Tzidkenu. So therefore, it is discussed in that talk. The Rebbe is talking about the enormous power of the day and its influence, its unstoppable influence, and how it can break through the toughest resistance. In Tammuz, a few days later, but it's already the next month, it's already the space of the energy changing. The Rebbe is very sensitive. You see, in all of the Rebbe's talks, the Rebbe is so sensitive to the vibrations of time, to the differences that they are, and what's the character. The Rebbe would spend usually the beginning of every Farbrengen discussing the various different elements of time that weave together a unique tapestry in which create the character of that particular time. So on Tammuz, it's a whole different nature. It's already the space of the recipient. It's the world. So here the Rebbe takes a thermometer and he's testing the world. Where is the world at? Where are we at? Where are his Hasidim at first? Where are the Jewish people at? And where is the rest of the world? And where is, when we say the world, we don't only mean humanity, we mean the physical world. What's the temperature? Where are they holding? How open are they to receive? So here the Rebbe says we got to be careful. We can't flood because we're going to bust the world, and that's not the intention. The whole tension is for a unification of heaven and earth, for a partnership, for the worlds have to rise, refine themselves to be ready to receive. So Mashiach, the giver, has to slow down. Which is quite stunning, because that's exactly what happened 3 years later on Gimel Tammuz. The Rebbe, who was like gung-ho Mashiach, driving, he's in the driver's seat, full throttle, going 100 miles per hour down the road, pulling the Hasidim with such an energy of geula, of redemption. For anybody that learns those talks knows that. It just gets more intense and more intense and more intense, and suddenly the Rebbe has a stroke and another stroke. Again, both of them on the same day. It's a stunning. If you want to see how God is, peeking through the curtains, even when he makes it dark, how he's making sure that we know that we're not off track. It's all part of the plan. It's all part of the great cosmic divine rollout, but which comes through various different stages. So suddenly on Gimel Tammuz, blackout. Where's the Rebbe? Almost like, where's Moses? Where's Moshe Rabbeinu? What happened to him? Are we on the way to Israel? Where's Moshe? He disappeared. Where's the Rebbe? Where's our captain? Where's our king? Where's our leader? Well, the Rebbe told us a few earlier, about a year and a half before that. This happened in 1994, the actual Gimel Tammuz. So 2 years, but when the last time he communicated, he said, listen here, guys, I'm not going to impose it upon you. You're going to have to do it. And we'll soon see what that entails. We're going to have to do it. Obviously, becoming more godly, more holy, more divine conscious, more kinder, more giving, and more Mashiach big in every way. Study about Mashiach, teach about Mashiach, get the world ready. We're gonna have to up our game, because we don't have any more of the influence or giving. Now, it's very important. Take a look at the day that the Rebbe, that by divine providence, that cosmic event happened. Gimel Tammuz. So in the Gimel Tammuz, you have both the giver, the influence from the Rebbe, from the Mashpia, from the giver, and the receiver, because it's the third day in the fourth month. However, what's the dominating factor is the month, because the month is the general, and the day is the detail within the month, which means that the Rebbe is basically telling us that this is your space. This is the month of Tammuz. I'm not going to pervade your space. I'm going to give you, so to speak, a little bit room to figure it out on your own, to be able to, come to where I am, lift yourself up, uncover your own Mashiach spirit within yourself, uncover the divine inner core of who you are at your very inner core. I'm allowing you, but I'm there assisting you, and I'm there helping you. I'm not going to let go of you for 1 second. And everybody who's a chassid, and anybody could become a chassid. Anybody that a chassid means someone who's attached to the Rebbe by studying and following in his ways, knows that the Rebbe's hand is always here. Always here. From stunning stories. One of them I'm going to tell to you right now. Which we're going to get to in a second. So, but what do we have over here? We have over here some kind of a conflicting, two powerful energies that seem to be conflicting one with each other. And this exactly is the secret. The secret is this yeah and the no, the positive and the negative working together. The chesed and the gevurah in our work that needs to be done. And particularly regarding to the very, very, very most intense subject that I'm about to bring up, which I would say that everybody can fasten your seatbelts, because we're going to go into some really intense territory. Now, to the intensity of this territory, I will say as follows, that I gave already a class last week. I don't know how many of you were online. It was on last week, Monday night, 8 o'clock, 8:30 about Los Angeles time. And it ended up being a 2-hour class. And this was the original run of this particular class, although last week I connected it very much to Parsha Shalach, which I'm not going to do today. In that talk that I gave, I gave kind of this message that I want to give today, but I didn't have the time to really process it and prepare it. I was provoked by something, I'm not going to go into what, which provoked me to want to give that class and to speak my heart out. And because I spoke unfiltered, I might have came across a little condescending, which means a little harsh. I have my way of seeing it. And because it's something so dear to my heart and to my soul, And as a result of my passion and my fervor and my call for action based on this, I was a little bit maybe, I don't even know how much, but I think to a certain degree, condescending to others that maybe are not on the same page with me. And then maybe a little guilt tripping, because chas v'shalom, I was kind of giving an excuse and a reason why Mashiach has not yet come in the last 30 years. After I finished the class, although I received many, many comments from many people, wow, they loved the class. It was a very intense class. But at the same time, I had a bad taste in my mouth. So much so that the first words that came out of my mouth, right after I said it, there was one person here. I said, I'm deleting the class right now. I'm hitting delete. And I didn't delete immediately. I was playing with it back and forth and back and forth. Some people reached out to me. It was that no one told me to delete. No, that not. Until I decide, I have a little custom. Maybe you can all. It's a good custom. I took upon myself 3 months ago. I ran a campaign to strengthen. When I say I ran, me and a couple of Hasidim got together to run a certain campaign, which I will speak about, Be'ezus Hashem, if I don't forget, at the end of the class. And in that campaign, it was part of the campaign in honor of the Rebbe's birthday was that Hasidim should strengthen their bond to the Rebbe by signing a letter of bonding. That's a concept that there is by Hasidim. When you accept upon yourself a Rebbe, someone as your master and teacher, you write a letter, usually a communal letter, that we, all of us together, are giving ourselves over to follow your directions. For whatever, I'm not going to get into all that right now. And over there was an option given everybody in order to ferment it in something, to actualize it in something tangible. Don't just leave it in the air. Take upon yourself something that will facilitate that intensification of the bonding. So the thing that I took upon myself, I wanted something small that I know I can do every day and I will not forget, or I'll try not to forget, is that there are people who give out Rebbe videos every single day, a daily video, a daily dosage of godly light coming through the face and the teachings and the words of the tzaddik, the leader of the generation. So I subscribed to one of these daily. You can subscribe through WhatsApp. I subscribe and I receive it daily and I watch it. That time it was 12 o'clock at night already, and I had a thought that I watched the Rebbe's daily video or not. And I checked on my WhatsApp to look what was the last video, and I say, yeah, I watched it, and I kind of was ready to go on to something else. And about a minute and two later, I noticed that the new video, the next one came in. The next video for the next day came in. So I took, really I should have said, okay, I'm going to sleep. Tomorrow I'm going to watch it. But something inside of me made me click on it right then and there. And I was going to eat tomorrow's dosage. I was eating it a day earlier. Let me gnash on tomorrow's video already today. So I opened up the video and I watched it. And it was about maybe less than 2 minutes, I think. And by the time I was done in the video, I was shaking, literally. I was terrified. I was scared. Because, usually these videos are very, very positive clips, something very encouraging and so on and so forth. Here, the Rebbe was talking so sharply and strongly about someone who publicly berates other people. And that if you have an issue with other people's beliefs, why don't you talk to them privately? Why do you go up on publicly and speak negative about an entire community? And the Rebbe says, if you want to rebuke people, first of all, you have to be dust and ashes. You have to be like dirt. And if you're not like dirt, who are you to talk? And I suddenly, literally, it was almost as if the Rebbe was in that room yelling at me. And I was sitting there and I was shaking. And I was saying, oh my, I'm so ashamed. I'm so embarrassed. Like, it was really harsh, really harsh. And it came exactly like right after I finished, like I said, an hour or so after I finished that talk. And I was debating if that talk was okay or not, because of this very reason. At that moment, I hit delete. I deleted it off YouTube. I deleted it off Facebook. That's where I put it on. And I don't record this anywhere else. It's recorded directly onto YouTube and to Facebook. I don't even have that recording anymore. People ask me, I want to watch it. I don't have it anymore. It doesn't exist anymore. And I was, and then, part of what the Rebbe was saying was that, as mentioned earlier, that before you talk and you rebuke other people, if you are absolutely nobody, like Moshe. Moshe said about himself that he's dust. That means if you're egoless, then you can talk. But as long as you have your own ego and you have a self, don't berate other people publicly. That was the idea. And if you do feel like someone has a different whatever, that's wrong, talk to them privately, right? But he spoke about being like dirt. Baruch Hashem, Hashem has given me a certain sensitivity. Not just me, every person should have that sensitivity. Hasidism teaches this sensitivity very much. It's the sensitivity coming from the Baal Shem Tov. Where the Baal Shem Tov teaches that everything you see and hear, God is speaking to you. So we have to try to have our eyes open all day long. So the day later, this happened Monday, so Tuesday afternoon, and again, I woke up still in the morning so bewildered, so uncomfortable, so in a sense disgusted with myself. Right? I'm thinking I got to do tshuva for this. That's what I felt. But here's what happened. My wife tells me at about 6 o'clock in the evening, oh, she says, I have work. I need to do something. I have flower plants. I want to fill my flower plants with dirt. So I ordered, oh, my dirt arrived, she said. So it's on that day, she says to me, if she asked me if I want to help her. Well, about 2 years ago, she filled the house with flower plants. Thank God, with plants. We have a lot of greenery in the house. And it's beautiful. And she's always taking care of it, making the plants grow. Never in my life that I remember was I busy with sticking my hands into soil, taking earth, and pouring it into plants. So then I realized while I was doing that, I literally was taking and pouring dirt, and then pouring the dirt, and then sticking my hands in to push down and press down on the dirt. It actually felt really nice to stick my hand into the soft. It was little moist dirt that had like this. But I was thinking at that moment, if I needed to touch soil and deal with earth, because, you know, in order to be able to say things, you know, you need to put your hands in the soil. I got my soil. So at that moment, that's why it still took me till today to be able to come on today and talk about this, because as much as my emotions are very tied into this, I do want to say that I hope that Hashem should have guided my tongue this time. I knew for sure that the Rebbe doesn't want me to give over the content of what I spoke, that I have many clear, okay, obviously everybody knows their own soul and knows their own convictions. I have very strong convictions about it, that I do need to talk, but that the way of the talk needs to be in a way that's very positive, and chas v'sholom, God forbid, not in any way that's negative. So that being said, this also further proves the idea of what I mentioned before, Gimel Tammuz, because this is one of the stories, and I have at least between 30 to 40, maybe 50 stories, and where I had such clear guidance, like when I was in a situation where the Rebbe was clearly steering me and guiding me, even obviously after Gimel Tammuz. Maybe more than 50, I haven't counted, but there's a lot of them that are stunning. They're just absolutely stunning. This was just a small one that just happened. So what's the subject today? This is all basically introduction, but this is connected to the two mentions that I mentioned earlier. I'm going to tackle head on the big question. It's a sticky question. It's a question that makes many people uncomfortable. But every question needs to be discussed based on the Torah. What does Torah have to say on it? And what does Hasidus have to say on it? What is the Torah perspective on it? We can what we say, belch out our own opinions if they're not based on anything. But let's take a look. There is what Torah says, what's reality, what's truth, and hopefully do it not from an arrogant place, and hopefully we'll be able to shed light. The sages say, the Zohar says, "B'chachma is bedidu." With chachma means two things: wisdom, which is the wisdom of the Torah, and b'chachma means bittul. Bittul means nullification. The power of ma is bedidu. You do a bitter. We refine. We bring clarity into confusing things. So to me, it's clear that this particular subject, which is like a stigma and it's confusion, and a lot of people are uncomfortable with it. Precisely that I want to take on heads on and talk about it. Basically, is the Lubavitcher Rebbe Mashiach? I said it as bluntly as I can. Is the Rebbe Mashiach? Okay, everybody wants to know who is Mashiach, when is Mashiach coming? We talk so much. We know we're living in the Messianic era. And here I just dropped the bomb. Is the Rebbe Mashiach? Okay, that's the question for today's class. Now, obviously, this is a huge question. and we can tackle it from many, many angles. Today, I want to talk about it from the perspective of Chassidus and the Rebbe, which means I'm not going to address this from a halachic perspective. The big problem, obviously, is because you're going to have so many Lubavitchers who are going to say, or so many people who are going to say, well, the Rebbe could have been Mashiach, and before Gimel Tammuz, before the Rebbe's departure from the physical, again, apparent, our physical, that we can see him. Before then he for sure is the most appropriate candidate to be Mashiach, and so on and so forth. But now you can't say so anymore. You can't say so. Halachically, you have a problem. I'm not going to address that today. And maybe I'll touch on something later in the class. If we get to it, that's not the point of it. My point over here is from the perspective of Hasidism, from the perspective of where should a Chassid be in their understanding of this subject, and in preparation for Gimel Tammuz, in preparation for Chav Ches Nisan, in coming away from this powerful days, what is supposed to be in our mind, how do we march forward, what is our objective, and so on and so forth. I will divide my question into 5 pieces, okay? Five things that I would like to address. The first thing is, did the Rebbe, regarding the first question. Now again, I have to say something again based on my introduction, is that I'm giving you my opinion of things the way I see it. When I say opinion, I mean serious opinion, meaning I am 1000% my deep conviction that this is the truth, or else I wouldn't be saying it. Because I can tell you one thing, that this is not such a comfortable subject to put your neck out, because a lot of people don't really like this. So therefore, by me saying it, I'm making myself pretty uncomfortable, and I'm putting myself out there, and I'm not looking for the attention coming from it. At least I don't think so. Consciously, subconsciously, I don't know what the motives or drives are. I hope I'm being driven just out of a pure godly place. But this is my opinion. I can't say this is the, I'm not Moshe Rabbeinu, and I'm not the part of the Sanhedrin. I'm a rabbi who's been teaching and learning Chassidus for many, many years, well immersed in these teachings. And I obviously, as a result of that, I have an opinion and come to that. But I feel that the opinion should be spoken, because not just I'm deciding that. I've been pushed a lot from various different events that happen in my own life that are kind of not letting me sit by quietly. Okay, so here's the 4 or 5 questions I want to deal with. Number 1 is, did the Rebbe believe and know that he is Mashiach? That's the question. Now, obviously, did the Rebbe? That means, did the Rebbe himself believe and know? Because believe is like you believe, but I'm saying much stronger than that. Did he know for certain? Because what he believed in is what he know for certain, is what he knew. Because the Rebbe is a godly man, and we know from many, many, many places that the Rebbe was in constant communication with the upper realms. So therefore, if he believed something, it's because he knew so for certainty. So now our question is, did the Rebbe believe and know that he is Mashiach? Now, obviously, that's a certain speculation, because we're looking at it from the outside. The question of it is what he himself believed and knew. Okay, so to the best of our observation, that's really the thing. To the best of our observation, that the Rebbe himself believed that he is Mashiach. Or did the Rebbe believe just that he's a candidate for Mashiach, or so on and so forth? Or did the Rebbe believe for certain that and know that he's Mashiach? Question number 1. Question number 2, did the Rebbe communicate that he is Mashiach? So that's a different story. It's one thing what you believe for yourself, what you know for yourself, is another thing what you communicate. I'm choosing the word communicate because communicate is a broad word. It's not just what did he say, it includes did he say. What did he say, but also his conduct and various different things that can communicate. So the question is, did the Rebbe communicate that he is Mashiach? Now, obviously, question number 2 is a follow-up effect question number 1. If we are to come to the conclusion that the Rebbe himself believed and knew that he is Mashiach, to what degree did the Rebbe communicate that to the world, to his Hasidim and to the world? Now, question number 3. It is a given and a known that Lubavitcher Hasidim all believed for sure before Gimel Tammuz, all I would say 95 or maybe 99% of the Hasidim believed that the Rebbe would definitely be Mashiach at that time. And those beliefs were very, very known to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe knew that his Hasidim believed that he is Mashiach. So the question is, the fact that his Hasidim believed that he is Mashiach, did the Rebbe approve of that? Which means, did the Rebbe, and the question would be, I'm going to say three things. Was the Rebbe not happy with that? Was it something that it upset him that his Hasidim believed that? He was frustrated by it or upset by it. He didn't like that his Hasidim believed that he is Mashiach. Was the Rebbe okay with it, kind of, if they believe so? Or did the Rebbe approve and maybe even support the idea that his Hasidim believed that he was Mashiach? It's a valid question. It's a valid, serious question that we should know. The next question. Did the Rebbe, obviously it's stage by step, did the Rebbe approve of his Hasidim announcing publicly? It's one thing what they believe in their own hearts or what they say quietly when they're sitting together by a Hasidic Farbrengen, saying L'chaim after singing some Nigunim, and they're saying it hushed one to each other. But was the Rebbe approved that this thing should be announced onto the streets, publicly taken to the world? Do we have, and here the same question, did this upset, if it happened, maybe it did, if it happened, did this upset the Rebbe? Was he kind of didn't matter to him? Or was he supportive of it? That's a very, very important question. And now comes the next question. And this one is not directly on the Rebbe, but this is the question. If the answer to all the questions above is going to be yes, or to some degree yes, as we're going to explore, and then the question is to us today, because here you can all ask me the question, why are we discussing this? Is there nothing else in the world to talk about? Why do we have to talk about this? Well, obviously, if you're on this channel, you know that I'm very passionate about Mashiach, and Mashiach has to come. And Mashiach's coming has to be with a human being, someone who's doing it. Now, if we don't have a candidate or we don't have a man doing it, we're not yet at first base. In order for us to be already at third base or very close to the winning the game, the question is, do we have our man already? So it probably is a little bit important for us to know, but the question is this important to discuss? Like, for what gain are we getting? It's controversial. It's making people uncomfortable. Some people get upset about it. So why talk about it? Why? What's the gain? So this is something that needs to be understood. Is there any point? Would we benefit today in the year 2022? Would we benefit today in the year Tufshin Pei Beis? 30 years after we've heard spectacular announcements that Mashiach is about to come at any second. But so far he hasn't come yet, which is problematic, which is very problematic, which has to make every single one of us ask the simple question, what is going on? We're believers in the Rebbe. We believe that every word that he spoke is holy and godly. So how can it be it's 30 years later? Is there perhaps a possibility that maybe, not a question of what we didn't do till now, but the question is regarding now going forward. Maybe there is something about this announcement or this understanding and appreciation and our ability to speak this to the world that maybe does make a difference and maybe perhaps could hasten the redemption, or maybe not. Maybe it doesn't hasten the redemption. Maybe it sets us back. And therefore, it's not a good thing to talk about. So these are the questions I want to address today. I hope we will get through. Well, we should be able to get through them, at least, mostly. And obviously, these are classes we can talk. Now, I will recommend to you that if you want thorough analysis on many, many of these things, even though I didn't address it in such a direct way, even though I did address it many classes in the past. But one of the more important classes to listen to regarding this subject is a series called Mashiach Decoded. It's on YouTube. If you look up the words Mashiach Decoded, my classes will come up. And it's a series, and it's a step-by-step understanding, fundamental understanding of Mashiach, and over there you'll be able to flesh out a lot of the points that I am saying now in a far broader way. Okay, so let us just begin. Obviously, the question is, what was the Rebbe's take regarding himself being Mashiach? And when the Rebbe became Rebbe, I mean, a lot of what I'm going to say now is known to a lot of the audience, but it's sometimes good to do a chazara and to hear again. When the Lubavitcher Rebbe became Rebbe in 1951, the Rebbe started his leadership. There's a custom by Chabad Rabbi and by Chabad teachers and masters that when they assumed the mantle of leadership, it was confirmed, it was valid, it was the official acceptance and the official inauguration, so to speak, into the role of Rebbe was by saying a Hasidic discourse. Hasidic discourse is what a Rebbe does. Hasidim don't give over Hasidic discourses. A Rebbe does. So when a Rebbe says a Hasidic discourse means someone who we are trying to get him to be Rebbe, or if the Hasidim are working on it, and he's maybe saying no, like it happened by the Rebbe for quite a long time. He was not accepting, and the Hasidim were begging and crying, and the Rebbe was refusing it. What was the basically consent? The consent, yes, I am your Rebbe, and from to now, this moment and onward, you are my Hasidim, and I'm your Rebbe, I'm your master and teacher, and you're bonding with me on a very deep soul level. And we're going to serve God together in a way that I can lift your souls up. That's what a Rebbe is, or one of the aspects, obviously, of a Rebbe, is when a Rebbe says, I'm my Chasidus. It says a discourse. The Rebbe's discourse then was a stunning discourse, and it's one that people study in the winter time, in the month of Shvat, January time, or the beginning of February, whenever it comes out, where over there, the Rebbe spoke in the discourse, the concept that there are 7 righteous tzaddikim, there are 7 holy, saintly people, who they are the ones who facilitate the descent of the Shekhinah to the world. The general gist of it, I'm not going into the details, the general gist of it is that God initially wants to be, God's desire more than anywhere else is to be present in the physical world, fully revealed in this physical world, even more than he is in the upper spiritual realms. But then there was a process because of mankind's sins, which is all part of the process, because as we said in the beginning, Hashem wants us to be partners. So obviously he has to leave us a little room to sin. And we actually, the little room that he gave us, we took hold of that little room and turned it into actually a way of life, a sinful way of life, sadly, which led to God having to distance himself from the world for thousands of years, until Abraham came about 2,000 years after creation and began to draw God down to the world, culminating in the event at Sinai and when the Jewish people built God a home in the tabernacle. So that was the culmination. And the real culmination was when King Solomon built the Holy Temple of Jerusalem. And this was all the realization and purpose of creation. However, in order to bring God from where God has been chased away, it took 7 righteous tzaddikim to bring God down. Who were those 7 righteous tzaddikim? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are the first 3. And then the lineage from Levi, who's the third, speaking about the number 3 earlier, the lineage of Levi, who him all the way down to Moses. Moses is the 7th one. And the 7th one is the most precious because he is the one who brings the Shekhinah down to earth. That is the context of the initial opening of the Rebbe's discourse. That there is an objective over here. The Shekhinah was brought down in the past through a consecutive effort of 7 righteous tzaddikim. Where one completed, the next one picked up. When the next one completed, the next one picked up. And each one making God more real in the world. But who is the grand finale? The closer, as you call it, as a pitcher, the one who closes it and wins the game finally. That's the closing pitcher. So who's the closing? The one who brought it down here and completed all the work of his previous ancestors and predecessors. That was Moshe. He's the 7th. So the Rebbe in the Maimer goes on to explain that he, speaking about himself, but he doesn't talk so much himself as me, he talks about us. You understand why? He's humble, And he's the Rebbe, and more than that, he's not embarking on this journey as doing it himself. He told us right at that very discourse, and that Farbrengen, the Rebbe, not in the discourse, but before it, leading up to it, don't think, or maybe afterwards, don't think that I'm going to be the one doing it, and you guys are going to be taking a very, very comfortable nap. If you're signing up to be part of my program, I'm going to work you in boot camp. That's basically what the Rebbe says, because we are working together. We're doing this together as a team. So, but he basically said, this is us. We are the seventh generation of the crown jewel of tzaddikim, whose principle was to bring God into the world. And because, by the way, the concept that God wants to live in this world, and that's the objective of all of creation, that's the idea of a midrash, but no one really spoke of that midrash until the first Chabad Rebbe, who made it the focal point of his entire Chabad Chasidus of teaching, is that God wants down here into this world. Of Shneur Zalman of Liadi, chapter 36 in Tanya, he makes this the nucleus of all of Judaism, God's desire to be in this world. But he revealed it in abstract, somewhere up there in the higher realms. The seven tzaddikim, the 6 consecutive Rebbes afterwards, each one made it more real down here in this world. And the Rebbe says, hey buddies, hey guys, I'm not going to say buddies, I'm sorry. We're number 7. Do you realize we're number 7? And just like Moses, who's number 7, needs to bring the Shekhinah down, we got to do it. But hold it, you're going to ask the question, well, Moses did it already. And the answer is, yeah, Moshe did it. He brought the Shekhinah down onto Mount Sinai and onto Har Sinai. But it didn't last forever. It lasts. King Solomon's temple, the Beis Hamikdash, the first Beis Hamikdash, was destroyed. And the sins caused God, and again, there was we tried to bring it back, and we brought it back temporarily in the second temple. Second temple never really matched the greatness of the first temple. It didn't last, and God was again chased away. And now is the time in the Mashiach process. We're bringing Hashem down now, finally. So the Rebbe says, hey, we are the 7th generation, by hook and by crook, whether you like it or not, whether we like it or whether we volunteered for it. This is where God put us in history, and therefore we need to know that this is our objective. We need to bring the Shekhinah back down into this world. Does that sound like someone declaring that he's Mashiach? Pretty interesting, no? I think so. If he's putting himself as the 7th tzaddik and he compares himself to Moshe, whose job is to bring the Shekhinah down permanently into this world, right? It's not leaving too much for the imagination after saying that. Right at the first thing. I'm just going to read you the words over here. Just fun that you see that I'm that. What's going on? He goes into the whole discussion over here, how the seventh generation is really not by its own virtue. It's only chosen because it's 7 to the 1st. And it's really, in other words, he's blaming the greatness not on himself, but on the earlier generations, but he's still accepting the role of what the role of this generation is. This is what's being demanded from all of us, the 7th generation. All the 7 are special. Even though this that we are in the 7th generation, no, we did not choose it. In other words, we didn't. The Rebbe is saying, I or neither of you came to God and said, pick me for this job. We didn't choose this. We didn't ask for it. But we also didn't do any work to be deserving to be the ones chosen for it. And here the Rebbe actually says, in many ways, we really didn't want this. I want to say something. Being a Mashiach is the biggest headache of a job that any human being ever has. Basically, every problem in the world is your problem. So unless you're the real deal, it's the most ridiculous thing to volunteer for. Let that sink in. Unless you're the real one who's chosen by God to do it, then it's ridiculous to want to volunteer for this. So the Rebbe says in the comment, in many ways, this has not been our will. Nevertheless, in the 7th are precious. And he's explaining, it's not just a 7 of tzaddikim. No, we find ourselves be'ikvus of the Mashiach. We're at the very end, with the footsteps of Mashiach. And at the very end, we're at the end. In the end itself, there can be end. And we're at the end of the end. We're on the last lap, so to speak. And our work is to complete the work of bringing the Shekhinah down. And therefore, we got to bring it down into this world. Anyways, this is what he says over here, and then he repeats it again further in the Mimer. He goes through stories of all the Rebbes, and he says that it is demanded from every single one of us. Now we need to know that Rebbe says this is a prerequisite. You're signing up for the Chabad journey. If you're signing up for the Chabad program and you want to be a chassid, you need to know that it's not, there is a ongoing chain which could go on infidel if we find an appropriate rabbi who can take over. There's a whole bunch of good Chabad work that could be done. The Rebbe said no. We are being demanded from. Hear these words. We are being demanded. This is what's being demanded from us. Who's demanding? God is demanding from us. What is he demanding? That we should know that we are in the 7th generation. That means we are the last link of a chain that has to conclude with us. There's no going further. Okay. And that means that we have to have the Mesiras Nefesh, and we have to devote ourselves with incredible loving kindness to the Jewish people, Avas Yisrael, selflessness, and so on and so forth. Anyways, and then the Rebbe concludes very strong in a everything is dependent now only on us, the 7th generation. And he concludes the words also with very intense thing. The Rebbe says we should merit to see ourselves, to meet up with the Rebbe, referring to his father-in-law, his Rebbe, down here, and his father-in-law should come back in a body, in a guf, his father-in-law, the Rebbe says, should redeem us. So first of all, this is an important idea, that the Rebbe is clearly talking about a person who passed away, person who's not here. The Rebbe is saying, let it be the will that we should merit, that we should be back together with him. And this individual who's not here, he will redeem us. Now, this is something which I have to interject right now over here, so this gets confusing. Did he just say he's the 7th, and that it's the job of the 7th to finish? But then a second ago, but now in the end, he concludes and he says, we're hoping to meet my father-in-law, and my father-in-law is the Redeemer. But the father-in-law is not the 7th. The father-in-law is the 6th. And if we're going to follow the example, we're going to follow what happened by Moshe. Moshe was the 7th, not Amram. Moshe wasn't just preparing everybody, and then when it finally comes the time, he's going to go get his father. Amram was, in that case, was not a father-in-law, but his father was the 6th, and get him to bring God down onto the mountaintop, or to bring the Shekhinah down into the Mishkan. Moshe didn't do that. Moshe was the one. So how is the Rebbe suddenly, at the last second, he flips it back on his father-in-law? So without going into too much Kabbalah and mysticism and so on and so forth, but anybody familiar with Chabad, Hasidus, and so on and so forth understands. In general, the Rebbe and his father-in-law are intricate. The Rebbe even said, his soul is in me. The Rebbe very, very much saw himself as one literal continuation of his father-in-law. And it has to do mystically, which is a subject onto its own, and it's really not, it would be not a good idea right now to get into it, that spiritually, the 7th generation, the 7th power is the power of Malchut, of kingship. And the power of kingship is like the moon that doesn't have any light of its own. It needs to receive it from higher up. And primarily, number 6 is the one that feeds number 7. So 7 and 6 are inextricably unified and intertwined one with each other. So it's clear that when the Rebbe was really meaning, what to me, is that his father-in-law will get up, because the Rebbe, to actually actualize the redemption, it will be him hand in hand with his father-in-law, which means he has the backing of his father. It's interesting that the Rebbe is implying that his father-in-law will actually be there physically alive to facilitate the final redemption. But through who? Through him. Through the 7th. Because or else he's negating right now the entire Maimer. It would be like Moshe Rabbeinu. Because again, it would almost, if that would be the case, then what the Rebbe really would be saying, that I'm just, taking care of business until my father-in-law returns. So it would be almost like Moshe, as we said earlier, that is filling in, And when it comes time to bring the Shekhinah down, you go back to Amram, his father. And that's not what happened. So the Rebbe is speaking about a empowerment, a strengthening. But the interesting thing is, something to note, is that the Rebbe is referring to a moment before Mashiach comes. I don't know how long before Mashiach comes. Someone who has already passed away comes back into a body to actualize the redemption. And the Rebbe says this regarding at the last words. And then the Rebbe addressed this later, a few days later, the Rebbe addressed it as a talk. That people have complaints to me or they're wondering about me. What is it that I'm saying? Isn't the resurrection going to happen after the coming of Mashiach? How can we talk about the Redeemer himself or the powers of the redemption, as we spoke about his father-in-law, coming here before the redemption if the resurrection only happens later? We're going to talk about that a little later. I'm not going to say what the Rebbe answered. I'm going to leave that a little later in the class. Okay, so we have the opening foundation. So already over here, we have a clear understanding that the Lubavitcher Rebbe did not, if we say that the Rebbe saw himself as Mashiach, it's not something that occurred to him at a certain point during his leadership. He saw his success. He saw that he's having such impact on the whole world. And he's beginning to hope or believe or so on and so forth that maybe he would be gifted, and he loves the Jewish people and he wants the redemption. He knows he's the leader of the generation. So therefore he's hoping that at this point God would kind of give him the green light or appoint him for Mashiach. The Rebbe is already seeing from the very initial starting of the program that this is his role. His role is to complete bringing the Shekhinah down into the world. We probably don't have to say anything else to ask if what the Rebbe saw his role. However, to make things far, far, far more compelling, without a question, a shadow of a doubt, is a few other things that I'd like to share. And again, we're not doing this for entertainment, chas v'shalom. We're doing this for a very, very serious and purposeful purpose. And this has a very, very deep, and this has huge consequences for us. And for us, in terms of us having the schus, the merit to be able to do something unique and special, to bring about the conclusion of exile and the redemption of the entire world. And for that reason, we're talking about this. Okay. So one of the things the Rebbe did speak about constantly, one of the phrases the Rebbe used was, our generation is the last generation of exile and it's the first generation of redemption. Just a simple phrase. Our generation is the Achron Shel Golos and the Rishon Shel Geula, the first generation of Geula. We are both. And the Rebbe didn't say that as a prayer. The Rebbe didn't say that as a wish. And the Rebbe didn't say that as a bracha, like as a blessing. The Rebbe declared this again and again and again and again. Our generation is the last generation of exile. We're the first generation of the Gil. I work on my research to find out when that phrase, the exact phrase in those exact words was used, when it started. In the latter years, the Rebbe said it nonstop. But when exactly it started, I don't know. I would be happy maybe if someone listening to the class would direct me to where you find somewhere the first statement where the Rebbe explicitly use those terms. But I am going to bring to you right now, just so that you can be assured that I'm not telling you my just whatever. I'm just sharing with you rights. Okay, here. This is in a talk that the Rebbe gave on the 5th of Tavis in the year 57-51, Shabbos Parshas Vayigash. The Rebbe says, Kiven shedereinu zeh, since our generation, Udoira Achron Shel Golos is the last generation of the exile, V'doira Rishon Shel Geula, we are the first generation of the Geula. That's it. The Rebbe is defining the generation. Last generation of exile, first generation of redemption. As a fact, he states, and therefore, there is certain things, he goes on, that we're seeing that is flipping, that we're already experiencing the flip of exile to redemption. That's what he goes on to say. But that's a phrase that he uses over here. He uses this same phrase very strongly in Parshas Nosai, for instance. Meduber kama pa'amim, also in the same year, 57, 51. I'm using this book called Besudas HaGeula, which is a book with a bunch of snippets of talks that the Rebbe himself, this was actually produced still before Gimel Tammuz, and that it's produced by Kahas. These are edited talks that the Rebbe had given. It's not the entire talks, just parts in which the Rebbe is. It's Besudas HaGeula means the message the Rebbe asked us to give over to the world, Besudas HaGeula, to convey to the world that Mashiach is coming. So over here, the Rebbe says, for example, another one, according to all the simanim shebedivrei Chazal that are in the statements of the sages, regarding the end of days, Inyono is our generation, we're the last generation of the exile, and we are the first generation of the redemption. And I have no idea how many times the Rebbe said that, but I can say that he said it many, 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 many times. I don't know if anybody counted it, but there's a whole lot. And that's very, very significant. Because when he says his generation, what exactly defines the generation? Where do we have a generation? 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, what exactly is generation? There's talk about it, halachically, what's called a generation. Is generation, think there's, one place says a generation is 40 years. A generation is, what exactly? 70 years. There's a Dazakena Balatosis, I think, that even says, again, I'm not sure, I remember seeing something about, I think, 70 years or maybe even 100 years could be a generation. I don't know. But what implies from the Rebbe's talks, and when the Rebbe speaks about generation, is going back to the first discourse. He's talking about 7 tzaddikim. He's talking about himself as the leader of the generation. That means that himself as the leader, as long as he's leader of the generation, that's the generation. And he's saying that the generation is the end of exile and the beginning of the Geula as a fact. So the Rebbe saw his leadership going from exile into redemption. So the Rebbe saw his generation as the generation that concludes the exile and goes into the redemption. As what? And he is the leader. The Nasi of the generation, him being the leader. So, if he is the leader of the generation that ends the exile and goes into the Geula, that means he is the leader of the Jewish people at the time of the redemption. Now, is the leader of the Jewish people at the time of the redemption the actual Redeemer? Maybe not. Maybe the leader of the generation is a leader. And that leader leads the people and does what he needs to do and strengthens them. God has some kind of a side messenger who is like his ultimate man, and he infuses him, he sends him from heaven, some kind of an angelic being who he sends in heaven, or whatever, however you want to describe it, some being that God chooses from the outside, and then probably would have to meet with this Jewish leader and convince this Jewish leader that he is the Mashiach, and that this Jewish leader obviously would endorse him, because or else, he's the leader. So somehow, I don't have to try to figure out how it's possible it would happen, but in many ways it would happen. But there would be a Jewish, similar, I'll give you a little example. Who was the leader of the Jewish people in Egypt? Not Moshe. Moshe wasn't there. Moshe was in Midian. For many, many years, Moshe ran away. Moshe wasn't with the Jewish people. Who was the leader? So before, in the early days, it was Amram, Moshe's father. And then after Amram passed away, Moshe's older brother, Aaron, the high priest, Aaron HaKohen, he was the leader. But he wasn't the Mashiach. His brother Moshe came. And then Aaron and Moshe. Then Moshe got Aaron's participation, and God himself anointed Aaron to help Moshe. Together they did it. So we can possibly argue that the Rebbe is saying that his generation, our generation, is the last generation of exile, and that this generation, which is his generation, as he being the leader, will go into the Geula. And Mashiach might be someone else. So the Rebbe, in many talks, and I'm going to point you now to where those, one or two of those talks, where the Rebbe explains very, very clearly, very, very clear words, that every generation has a potential Mashiach. Right? Every generation has a potential redeemer. And who is the potential redeemer of the generation? And wait, and what do you mean a potential redeemer? A person that if, for whatever reason, spontaneously, or because the Jewish people have an enormous merit, and they merit that they trigger that God should redeem the Jewish people, there has to be a man on standby. There has to be someone who is ready, who can qualify. Because again, Mashiach is not through an angel from above, Mashiach is through a human being. So there has to be someone who qualifies, someone who's ready to redeem the Jewish people. And when God will empower him, then he will go and redeem the Jewish people. So the question is that person on standby a quiet, hidden tzaddik, a cobbler, a shoemaker, a person that owns a little, Yemenite restaurant and is in the back oven and people say hello and he says Tehillim all day and then someone comes in and he makes you a little pizza and something, or he's, some water carrier or something. Who is the Mashiach of the generation? Is it a hidden tzaddik, or is it the public grand leader of the Jewish people? So what's the Rebbe's opinion on the matter? Again, that's what I'm saying I'm concerned with. In this particular class, I'm analyzing this. There's a lot to talk from 1,000 other sources, but that's not the point of this class. The point is we want to enter into the world of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, what his thoughts were about himself, and so forth. Therefore, I'm using the Rebbe's Torah. So the Rebbe explains in the great length in a kunteris that the Rebbe gave out. It's called Beis Rabbeinu Shebebavel. Let me see if it's over here. I think it's in this. Kunteris Beis Rabbeinu Shebebavel. Maybe it's not in here. Oh, and maybe I don't have it in front of me right now. But that's one of the places where it is. What a shame. I thought I had everything I needed, but I guess I don't. But in that talk, the Rebbe you can look it up. It's called Kunteris Beis Rabbeinu Shebebavel. It was published in the year 57-52. The Rebbe himself had it published. It was one of the most stunning Mashiach revelations that the Rebbe had ever endorsed. And it was even a shock that the Rebbe would allow such a piece to go out based on other things I'm going to talk to you soon. So over there in that talk, the Rebbe goes through a whole thing that there is the leader of the Jewish people during the exile. And that leader, he is the Mashiach of the generation. The leader of the generation is the Mashiach of the generation. Okay? And therefore the Rebbe says it was Rabbeinu HaKadosh, the Rebbe, the author of the Mishnah in his days, and so on and so forth. And the Rebbe concludes in that talk that his father-in-law, again, the Rebbe always speaks about himself as an extension of his father-in-law. So the Rebbe, when the Rebbe is talking about, the Rebbe, the leader of the generation, the Rebbe says, my father-in-law, the leader of the generation. But again, anybody that has only the slightest bit of knowledge of Hasidus Chabad and knows the style of the Sichos, knows when the Rebbe is talking about his father-in-law, the leader of the generation, he's talking about himself. Because he's an extension of that leadership. And the Rebbe says that the Mashiach of the leader of the generation, the Nasi Hadar, the leader of the Dar, is the Mashiach of the Dar. Okay. So now let's start putting pieces together. If the leader of the generation that the Rebbe is clearly saying is the Mashiach of the generation, okay, and the generation is the last generation of exile and the first generation of the Geula, means that the Mashiach of the generation is actually going to be actualized. Because there are many Mashiachs, potential leaders of generations, who were on standby, and if God would choose them, they would be the Mashiach. But if God did not choose them, then they passed away, and we moved on generation after generation, and they were not Mashiach. So it was a potential Mashiach that never made it to an actualized Mashiach. And obviously that's the most arguable argument regarding the Rebbe. That the Rebbe was a potential Mashiach, a very good potential Mashiach, an enormous potential Mashiach, probably a potential Mashiach that did more than all the Mashiachs before him because he was so driven, unbelievable, and reached so much. But in the end, it didn't happen. But I'm looking at what the Rebbe is saying to see if that's a valid argument. So I'm telling you, based on everything that I read and I see, that the Rebbe declared without a question, without a shadow of a doubt, and if we believe all those words are divinely inspired, that means that God said so. Because or else the Rebbe wouldn't be saying it, unless he's saying to you what is emes, what's true. Especially something that he didn't say once, he said twice and 3 times and 4 times and 10 times, and he kept on saying it. Our generation is the last generation of the Golus, the first generation of the Gula, as a statement, as a fact. Whose generation? His generation, and he is the leader. And that leader is the Mashiach of the generation, is the Nasi of the generation, is the Mashiach of the generation. Let me actually give you a strong one like that. Over here in Parshas Chayesara. Parshas Chayesara in the Tafshin Nun Beis, 57-52. Is das al pi hayadua? The Rebbe says, as b'chol dover dor, in every generation, noilad echad mizera Yehuda, one person from the descendants of Judah, of Yehuda, who is ready to be the Mashiach for the Jewish people. So he's talking about a potential Mashiach. And every generation there has to be a potential leader. Echad, and that's stated, that is a statement from the Bartanura, which is a pirush on Megillas Rus. The same Bartanura that is a pirush on the Mishnah, also on the Rus. And the Rebbe quotes a statement from the Chassam Sefer, one of the great halachic authorities in the early 19th century. It says, a person who is worthy, based on his righteousness, li is goel, to be the Redeemer. And when the time comes, God will reveal himself to this individual and he will send him. But this is a quote. So we have two ideas. Number one, that in every generation there's a potential. And how will it work? That potential might not even know. The Chassam Sefer says he might not even know his role. But then God, if time comes, God will actually communicate to him and tell him, get ready, because here we go, right? So now the Rebbe continues. And based on what my father-in-law notified, based on what my father-in-law notified, hear these words, who is the only messenger of our generation. When he says messenger over here, the only messenger, what do you mean? Oh, God, the Rebbe is the only messenger? What he means is, this is a continuation of the talk where he's talking about that there is a shlichus to redeem the Jewish people. The shlichus of Moshe Rabbeinu, who was the Redeemer, shlachna b'yad tishlach, and that powerful, an agent for redemption, that's what he's referring to. So he says about his father-in-law, which again, as we said before, intricably himself, he's the only shliach in our generation. And here the next words, there ain't 60 Mashiach shebedareinu. He is the only Mashiach of our generation. And since he notified us, as Martin Alt verendigt, that everything has been done, is verstandig, so it's understood. That means we finished the work. So right now, we're already starting his work, the previous Rebbe's work, to actually bring Mashiach. And therefore, we're going to go through what he said later. I don't want to say that now. What he was telling the Hasidim as a result of that. So what do we have over here? A clear statement where the Rebbe is clearly saying, and again, I am pointing to you to just a few statements, but to each and every one of these, there's at least another 3 or 4 of them that kind of are saying the same thing, sometime in other words, but the Rebbe is saying it in very, very explicit words. And that is that, again, the leader of the generation is the Mashiach's generation. Our generation is the last generation of the exile, and it's the first redemption of the Geulah. Put the pieces together, and then go back to his first mimer, saying what he said from the beginning. He pretty much is stating what he is saying. Okay, but we're not done yet. From 57 in general, from 57, 50. 57, 51, 57, 52, the Rebbe ratcheted up his Mashiach talk in a way way beyond everything that he was saying earlier. In the earlier years, the Rebbe spoke a lot about Mashiach, and he infused Mashiach very, very strongly right at the beginning in the Basi Legani, early year Sichos, a lot of very intense talks about Mashiach. It was a certain. I'm not an expert to tell you that I learned all the sichos and tell you that I can be an observer from the side and say like how there was a little bit of a slowdown in it or less or more. I don't want to go into that. But one thing is for sure, in the beginning it was very intense. And at the last 3 years, the Rebbe was speaking far more openly, saying things that shocked the Hasidim we haven't heard before. So in the midst of these talks, especially in the summer of 1991 and the winter of 1992, this is the period of time right before the Rebbe had his stroke, the Rebbe revealed and said like mind-blowing talks. But what I do want to say is, we can go on to speak about little nuances of what he said, but that would be defeating the point. Because it wasn't the little nuance, it wasn't the fact that the Rebbe would repeat again and again that Mashiach's name is Menachem, and that the Rebbe himself was the one who initiated that his building where he lives in is 770. The Rebbe said the numeric value of 770 is Beis Mashiach. And that the Rebbe himself said that 770, the gematria, the numeric value of 770, is gematria Paratzta, Ufaratzta, the famous song of Ufaratzta, which is, what does Paratzta mean? It's referring to Mashiach, whose name is Peretz, because Mashiach himself, meaning, what do I say? The ancestor of Mashiach is Peretz, the son of Yehuda, the one who was born, one of the twins, and for whatever reason, the Peretz, this son of Yehuda, he's the embodiment of Mashiach's energy, expressed in his name, that he breaks all the boundaries, that there's no barrier that blocks godliness in front of this intense superpower fellow called Peretz. So, and the pasuk actually uses regarding Mashiach also the term Peretz, Allah HaPoretz, that the one who breaks the boundaries will go before the Jewish people to break all constraint and all blockages. The Rebbe, when he sets his amazing army of shluchim, of tanks, of spreading the entire world, mitzvah campaigns to reach globally the entire world. The Rebbe's, for anybody back in the 70s, knew Lubavitch then, the motto of Chabad was Ufaratzta. You will spread, you will burst all barriers and spread Judaism in places where no one can believe you can ever reach. So the Rebbe says the word Paratzta is gematria 770. So he's saying that 770 is the place of Paratzta, where all barriers are broken. On the last talk, one of the last talks that the Rebbe gives, the Rebbe edits the talk, and then he adds a footnote. And he says that Mashiach should come miyad, instantly. Mashiach should come immediately. So on the word miyad, he writes, I can actually read it to you so you'll know that. I want to just say stuff without giving you a source. In the words miyad, over here, he says, Keinti alana b'poyel mamish, so it should be literally, take of a miyad mamish. Instantly Mashiach should come. Im kol ha-perushim shebimiyad, with all the interpretations of the word miyad. Koil gam Rosh Tevis, how miyad, the Rebbe says, represents the main players of Mashiach to the world. Moshe, who is the initiator. Yisrael, the Baal Shem Tov, who is called Yisrael. And David, because you take a combination of Moshe, David, and Yisrael, Baal Shem Tov, you have the energies of redemption. Okay. So now on the words David Malka Mashiach, which is referring to King Mashiach, the Rebbe puts a note. More specifically, in addition to the dynamics of these three giants, which represent the cosmic energies of all of history, Moshe, King David, and Yisrael Baal Shem Tov. In addition to that, in a more concentrated level, as it applies to our generation, Shabbat Tev is the miyad, that in the acronym of the word miyad, Nirmazim Gimel Kufis are hinted to the three stages that are connected to my father-in-law. The three stages. What are they? I'll say that Akirva Aleinu, in accordance to being starting from what's closest to us today, our generation. And the Rebbe is always blaming everything on his father-in-law. That's his anchor. So he says, 3 generations that are related to my father-in-law. Who are the three generations that are related to his father-in-law? His father's father, his father-in-law. He's the fifth Chabad Rebbe. The Rebbe is the Reb Shalom Dov Ber, known as the Rebbe Rashab, and the Friediger Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, and the Rebbe himself. And here's actually a very rare, the Rebbe didn't do this much, where he makes references to his own name and he puts himself into it. And here he writes it. So the word miyad has three letters. Mem, Yud, Dalet. Miyad means immediately. We want Mashiach to come now, instantly. So the Rebbe says the word miyad stands for three letters. Mem. Who's Mem? Now the Rebbe could have written, no, he could have written his own name, Menachem. The Rebbe's name, Menachem Mendel. Both his names start with Mem. Could have written Menachem Mendel. He doesn't write that. You know what? Let's stop for a second, because we'll leave the best for the last. The word miyad is Mem, Yud, Dalet. So the Yud, he says, Yosef Yitzchak, his father-in-law, both names start with Yud. Yosef Yitzchak. The word Dalet, in the word miyad, Dalet, he says is Dov Ber. Dov Ber, which is the second name of the Rebbe Rashab, the Shalom Dov Ber. So you got Yosef Yitzchak and Dov Ber in the word miyad. What's with the Mem? Now the Rebbe clearly wants to write the Mem as himself. Now he could have written very nicely, Menachem Mendel. He doesn't even write that. He writes, highlighting the Mem, Mashiach. The Mem is Mashiach. And in parentheses, he puts Menachem Shemai, whose name, Mashiach's name is Menachem. This is pretty interesting that the Rebbe would do that, right? He basically is clear. Why am I pointing to that? Because this is like probably the most explicit writing, saying that he people said, did he say it? It's very interesting. But I want to take everybody back a second, but this is very, very important. We can get caught up in these little statements, which by a Rebbe, nothing is little. If he dropped the line here and he dropped the line there, he's saying something. But I think what we're missing is a much bigger picture over here, which is very, very crucial and very important. And that is that when the Rebbe talks about himself and about, again, him and his father-in-law as one, but as himself as a Mashiach, as the Mashiach energy in the world, the Rebbe is doesn't add that in as a side note like he does over here. Over here, he does add it in as a side note. He finds a word, miyad. The Rebbe takes his entire vision of Mashiach. He discusses the cosmic transformation of the Geula, of the redemption, and he interprets it and shows us how that's the story of his own life. That's what's mind-blowing. And that's what I feel a lot of people miss, because so many people don't study these talks, which the Rebbe gave in the last 2 years. We're going to get to that, why maybe that is the case, that some people have stopped learning them or didn't learn them. But I think it's so important to realize that. The Rebbe is not just finding little nuggets and throwing in Mashiach. He does that too. That's putting a little flower on the top, a little Mashiach gadget on the top. But that's not what he was doing. Not only that, he was doing something much more. And I'm going to point you to three mind-blowing talks where the Rebbe talks about his entire idealistic understanding of what Mashiach is, and he speaks about it as his own life. So, for instance, I began the class talking about the talk the Rebbe gave on the 28th of Sivan, the day that he came to America. And I told you over there that the Rebbe is saying that the 28th is the power of Koach, and Sivan is Torah. So Koach Sivan, the 28th of Sivan, means the power of Torah. And in that talk, the Rebbe is explaining how the ultimate power of Torah equals Mashiach. That when Torah completes its energy and its influence on the world, that's when you get Mashiach. And the Rebbe says, what's the power of Torah? Where does Torah reveal its ultimate strength, its ultimate power, its ultimate ability? Only when the Torah comes to the lowest, most removed, most disconnected elements in creation and flips them, not only first of all subdues them, and not only subdues them and destroys the negative, but actually flips over the darkest elements and transforms it to holiness. That's the ultimate triumph of Torah. And when the Rebbe gives that talk, he's saying it as an explanation on the day of the 28th, the day that he came to America. And he's so clearly stating that that's the meaning of me coming to America on this very day, because that's the whole entrance. Today is a special day. Let me explain you what this day is all about. And then he goes on to explain, literally, in the actual talk, he doesn't even leave it to the imagination. He goes on, that just the beginning would have been enough for us to kind of write the rest of the script, but he doesn't do that. You can read the talk. The entire talk continues. How this final job of reaching the lowest part of the world and transforming it and revealing the unity of God in the world and uncovering Hashem's emes even in the lowest of places, how he says that's the purpose of Torah, and then how it took on a whole new meaning once the secrets of Torah are revealed through the Baal Shem Tov and through the Chabad Rabbeim, Reb Shneir Zalman of Liadi, but still it remained in the upper hemisphere. It didn't yet permeate the lowest part of the world. And then as a result of his father-in-law coming to America, we started to transform and change the lower part of the world. And eventually, the Rebbe says, we flipped it over so powerful that 770, the Rebbe goes into a whole explanation of what 770 means. That 770 then becomes the nucleus of all of creation, from where light goes out to the entire world, to illuminate, to inspire, to make the whole world godly, to conquer the entire world from 770, from the lowest point. And that is Koyach Sivan. That is the whole power of the Torah giving to the world. It's supposed to result in this transformation. So the Rebbe took a personal element of his own life. It could have been a personal anniversary. The Rebbe could have sat down with a bottle of wine with his wife. The truth is the Rebbetzin wasn't alive anymore, so he couldn't have celebrated with her personally. First of all, the Rebbe could communicate with his wife even when she passed out. We know. But okay, I misspoke on that. But the Rebbe could have had a private little celebration. No. He takes to the Hasidim, he speaks about it, and he explains it in such a cosmic way that this is the whole purpose, relating to his personal, what happened to him is the story of Mashiach, of the complete redemption. That's one. And I'm going to lead you to another one where the Rebbe does the exact same thing, but maybe even more. Also relating to his wife passed away on the 22nd day of Shvat. So in a stunning talk, in the winter of 57, 52, Tav Shin Nun Aleph, 1992, just a few weeks again before the Rebbe's stroke, the Rebbe gives another talk. Now, I do want to say, and it's really, really, it goes without saying, and it should not be even needed to say. It shouldn't be needed to say. I'm only saying it because I need to deal with a certain klipa, a certain impurity that might be out there, that might be throwing people off and giving people like a little bit of and that is that some people might argue, since the Rebbe didn't speak about it so openly all the years and only started speaking about it the last few months before the Rebbe had a stroke, maybe the Rebbe was at that time already a little bit of a state of hallucination. Maybe the Rebbe was a little bit in a state of kind of like not really with it. And in those statements, he was making these like these very wild statements. And I do want to say to you, okay, I understand if you're looking at the Rebbe, first of all, if you look at the Rebbe from a very human perspective, from a very coarse, I would say it's a coarse perspective, then maybe you would come to, somebody can make such an argument, but only until you actually take the books and you start reading them. When you take the books and you start reading them, and you see, and you're not talking about someone who is in any ways mind is not as sharp can be. I will tell you without a shadow of a doubt, and again, this I can tell you, that these talks, which were given primarily from the 28th of Nisan, after the Rebbe said, I give it over to you to bring Mashiach, to complete the work of bringing Mashiach. We merited 11 months of spectacular talks. They are off the charts, one by one, mind-blowing talks. They're genius of genius. And they encompass all of Hasidus, the deepest teachings of Hasidus. It's like spectacular. It's hard to say, these are better or, it's like, it's wow. It's like it's another level of learning, those particular sikhs. So therefore, these sikhs should be taken as valid as the rest of the Rebbe's Torah, as serious as the rest of the Rebbe, and not even one iota less. And I'm purposely pointing this out. So on the 22nd day of Shvat, which in Chabad is the convention of the ladies, the women have their shaluchas, their convention there. The Rebbe spoke about the significance of his wife passing away on the 22nd day of Shvat. In his talk over there, the Rebbe is talking about 3 numbers, 10, 11, and 22. And he explains that 22 is 2 times 11. And he's speaking a lot about the idea that his father-in-law, the previous Rebbe, passed away on number 10 because it was the 10th day of the month. His father-in-law passed away on Yud, the 10th day of the month. The Rebbe mentions, not in that talk, but in other places, how his father-in-law is very, very much connected to number 10. And that's why both of his names start with the letter Yud. Yosef, Yitzchak. Both start with the Yud. And the Rebbe goes through many other things, pointing out how his father-in-law is very much related with the holiness that number 10 represents. Then the Rebbe goes on to explain that then there is, as great as 10 is, 11 is much higher. And he explains what 11 is. Now, why is the Rebbe talking about 11 is? Because his father-in-law passed away on the 10th day of the 11th month. When did the Rebbe become Rebbe? Our Rebbe, the 7th Rebbe, become Rebbe on the 10th day of the 11th month in the 11th year, but really it was already the night going to the 11th day of the 11th day of the 11th month. In other words, so the Rebbe is going into a whole explanation of what the significance of number 11 is. And the Rebbe doesn't just, if you're a Kabbalist or you're a mystic or you're involved in any kind of spirituality, you can go, even me who knows very, 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 very little, yet with numbers, I love numbers. I can go and speak about 7 for an hour or 2 and about the numbers. So the Rebbe is not just talking about how special 11 is. The Rebbe is explaining how 11 is like the number that represents the fusion of heaven and earth, a fusion of the infinite with the creation, the ultimate Mashiach. That's 11. And the Rebbe explains how the 10 commandments, there is 10, but really in the depth of the 10 commandments, the essence of it is the 11th, it's like the 11th commandment, which is God is very, very self. And he goes on. And then he explains how in number 11, there is really two levels in 11. There's the lower level of 11, and there's the higher level of 11. And the fact that his wife passed away on the 22nd, which is number 22, and the Rebbe goes on to explain that really in the previous Rebbe's final preparation of the world to Mashiach, in the previous Rebbe, starting in the last infusion of divine of work that we do during the exile, to go from the exile to the redemption, this process is a process that goes through first number 10. When you complete number 10, we elevate to the number 11, but to the lower level of 11. And then the ultimate revelation of Mashiach in all of its perfection is the higher level of 11, which is the essence of God himself. That's the idea. And then the Rebbe says how these represent three eras in his and his father-in-law's lives. His father-in-law's leadership is number 10. The Rebbe says, doesn't say it in such words, but you read the talk, you see that he's talking about himself, because he says after the previous Rebbe passed away, the continuation of his work through those who continued. The Rebbe said, so me, really, number 11, until my wife passed away, is all the work that Lubavitch did now, that's number 11. And from the time on that my wife passed away, which is 1988, Tavshin Mem Ches, we entered into a whole new level, which is the higher level of number 11, which is the epitome of Messianic revelation, which is Mashiach itself, and so on and so forth. Read the talk yourself. each one of these talks need a whole entire class or 3 classes to give over. So I'm not doing it. Why am I bringing these particular 2 talks? Just to convey that when the Rebbe spoke about his association with himself in the Messianic process, it wasn't just a little nugget or a little addition or a little thing. The Rebbe put himself and the leader of the 7th generation at the center of this whole Messianic process. And let me lead you to one more, which every Chassid who learns Chassidus knows about, because this is from the earlier years. This is not from the last years. There is a famous series of talks that the Rebbe gave in the year 1966, I think it was, Tashin Chavav, and they made a book out of it, which the Rebbe had it published and printed and so on and so forth individually, called Inyono Shel Moshiach, which is here to explain the content of what Torah Chasidus is all about. What the Rebbe is revealing what Chasidus is all about. In that talk, which is an amazing talk of the various levels of Torah that there are, the Rebbe is explaining that there are 5 levels of soul and there are 5 levels of Torah. In general, the Rebbe goes ahead to explain how it is tradition in Torah that there are 4 levels of Torah. Pshat, the literal, remez, when you find hints, drush, I forgot they use homiletical, I think. And then finally, sod, which are the secrets, the mystical element of Torah. And the Rebbe goes on to explain that they correspond to the 4 levels of soul. Nefesh, ruach, neshama, and then neshama l'neshama, soul to soul. So he explained, and there are 4 worlds, Asiya, Bria, Yetzirah, 4, everything, the world is divided in 4. But then the Rebbe explains, so what's Chasidus? Chasidus is not any of these levels of soul. Chasidus is the quintessence of the soul itself. It's called Yechida. Yechida is the inner highest name of the soul. And that's Chasidus. Then the Rebbe goes on to explain the teachings of Chasidus are the innermost of the Torah. It was revealed through the Baal Shem Tov and so on and so on. Then the Rebbe goes on to explain who is the person who is going to reach the level of Yechida, who represents, in terms of history, these souls, who is going to be the Yechida. That is Mashiach. Mashiach is Yechida. And the Torah that Mashiach teaches is the Yechida element of Torah. What is the Rebbe saying? If you learn through it, again, I'm doing it very briefly, is the Rebbe is really saying, not really, he's saying it very clearly, that Mashiach begins really in a very, very real way to the world already with the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov is already the soul, the Messianic soul, because he's teaching the Torah of Mashiach. He's bringing Chasidus to the world. He's bringing Yechida to the world. But that Chasidus that the Baal Shem Tov spoke was still very lofty, not so revealed in the world, a little too, very up there. On that there came the next Rebbe, the Mizrich Magid, and then you had primarily all of the masters of Chasidus were all tapping and touching the energies of Yechida. But the Rebbe goes on to explain how Chasidus Chabad has facilitated and drawn down that Yechida out into the open and into a complete manifest, revealed way in the world. And the Rebbe there goes on to explain that the main element of the coming of Mashiach, the nucleus of the coming of Mashiach is not the gathering of the exiles. It's not the drawing of the Shekhinah down in the world. It's not the restoration of the Beis HaMikdash. The Rebbe explains the main element of Bias HaMashiach is the revelation of the super soul of Mashiach that is Yechida, who will elevate the essence of the Jew, who will elevate every Jew because he will uncover in each and every one of us our Yechida. And as a result of that, he will connect our Yechida, through his Yechida, he will connect us to the essence of God. And he will reveal that in all of creation. And the Rebbe says that is Chasidus. So what is the Rebbe doing? He's making Mashiach he's clearly stating that Mashiach is associated with Chasidus. That the Mashiach is not some new teaching that's not, you might say, Chasidus is a nice preparation. When Mashiach will come, he will be a new type of a leader. He will bring a new teaching that's not Chasidus. The Rebbe is clearly saying it's not that way. Again, I'm not talking about what it says elsewhere. I'm talking about what did the Lubavitcher Rebbe teach. So in his teachings, the Rebbe teaches that Chassidus is Yechida, and the master of Chassidus, that's the through which Yechida is being revealed, that's Mashiach. So I'm saying, when you take that together with all the other talks that were said in the later years, which were far more explicit, it goes without saying, it doesn't even leave, I believe, any possible room to the argument that the Rebbe did not believe that he was Mashiach. Not just didn't believe, but I asked two questions over here. Number one, did the Rebbe believe he's Mashiach? And did the Rebbe communicate that he's Mashiach? I think it's very clear, based on all these talks and things the Rebbe said, that the Rebbe very, very, very much believed so himself. And if he believed so, it's because he knew so. And about whether he communicated, he was communicating it. Now, did he communicate it with the words exactly? Hey, everybody, I am the Messiah, and I came to redeem the world. No, he didn't say that. But did he say that? He said that in 1,000 ways possible, without actually saying those. And he didn't come down and say, Anahu Malka Mashiach. That he didn't say. So the explicit statement of saying that, no. But did he communicate it in all of his talks? 100%. Now, what was the Rebbe's did the Rebbe approve, and that was the third question that I was asking, of whether it's Hasidim believing that he is Mashiach? And anybody knows that Chabad, when I came to Lubavitch, that was already like when it was like really climaxing. It was reaching a point of like, wow. But even before that, Hasidim were always murmuring, talking quietly. There was that notion that Lubavitchers believed the Rebbe is Mashiach. What was the Rebbe's reaction to that? And did the Rebbe ever like mix into that interesting idea? So I want to share with you an interesting story. So first of all, in some of the talks that the Rebbe gave over here in Sefer Asichas Tafshin Nun Aleph, this was a very, no, not this one, this one. Parshas Tazria Metzora. So the Rebbe is talking about over here regarding Rabbi, the author of the Mishnah. And the Rebbe says, the name of Mashiach, the Redeemer. Mashiach is called the leper, the Metzora Shabes Rebbe. One of the very interesting things the Rebbe speaks about in this particular talk, how Mashiach is not someone who appears from outside the exile, but he rather is someone who is with the Jewish people in the exile, suffering along with the exile. Minugaim v'hunama minuga. So he says, Mashiach nimtza ba'olam, that Mashiach is in the world, bizmano makam agalos. Mashiach is the one who's with the Jewish people during the time of the exile. Ubematzav shel golos. And Mashiach is in a situation of exile himself. That means he is with them. Shesoivel tachluei agalos. The Mashiach suffers along with the Jewish people in exile. Like the Gemara says, and now the Rebbe brings the famous Gemara in the Masechta Sanhedrin, where it discusses how the rabbis identified who Mashiach is. So one of the sages said that if Mashiach is from those that are alive now, it's Rabbeinu HaKadosh. In Mashiach, so the Rebbe makes a note. The students of Reb Shila said Shila was his name. Rabbi Yanai says Yinon Shema. Yinon is his name. Fine. Reb Chanina's students believe that he was Chanina. Fine. And then the Rebbe brings V'yesh Oim Menachem ben Cheskia. Mashiach's name is Menachem. Fine. After the Rebbe finishes bringing how all the students believe that their Rebbe is Mashiach, the Rebbe adds these words: Vanan Chasidim, and we Chasidim, Nena Abbasrayo, we will join along in this practice. Benegel Rabbi Seinu Nisayenu, regarding our teachers. The Rebbe says, if we find in the days of the sages that there were people who said so about their leaders, we will say so about our leaders as well. Ubifrat, and particularly my father-in-law, the previous Rebbe, Yosef Shemai, that Mashiach's name, the Rebbe says, is Yosef. Shenema Yosef ad neshenes yadoi v'asim nitchi Yisrael Yitzchak Shemai shenema oz yamal Yitzchak Pinu. So the Rebbe is saying that both Yosef and Yitzchak, which are the two names of the father-in-law, they are Mashiach names. So the Rebbe is saying we're following along a tradition that the Hasidim say so about their Rebbe. Now, who's the Rebbe talking to? The Rebbe is talking to his Hasidim. The Rebbe knows that his Hasidim are not Hasidim of the previous Chabad Rebbe. The Rebbe knows that his Hasidim are his own Hasidim. And the Rebbe didn't want his Hasidim to be Hasidim of the previous Rebbe. What do I mean by that? Of course, if you're connected to the Rebbe, you're connected to Friediger Rebbe, doesn't it? The Rebbe not changed. The Rebbe advanced. I don't want to say changed, but the Rebbe built on the previous Rebbe. And the Rebbe demanded of his Hasidim things that the previous Rebbe did not ask for. Those Hasidim that were kind of stuck still with the previous Rebbe, still stuck on his predecessor, the Rebbe gave them a hard time. The Rebbe needed them to be with the program. The Rebbe needed them to be his Hasidim, not the Hasidim of the previous Rebbe. And there were those who had a hard time. You know, when you're given over to a Rebbe, it's very hard to transition. So there were Hasidim who were a little faster, and there were Hasidim who were a little slower. But those that were a little slower, you know, the Rebbe knew that he is Rebbe, and the Rebbe expected his Hasidim to listen to him. And if the Rebbe would send someone to do something, and the Chassid would say, "But your father-in-law told me like this," that would be unacceptable. A Chassid listens to his Rebbe. So what is the Rebbe over here saying that we Hasidim say on my father-in-law? The Rebbe is a very, very, very intelligent man and a very smart man. The Rebbe knew that his Hasidim believed that he is Mashiach. And the Rebbe encouraged it in this talk, and this is only one of them. There are times where the Rebbe says that Tzemach Tzedek's name, he goes through how, the same idea that our Rabbeim are Mashiach, and again, understand something. From the perspective of Chabad Hasidism, and from the perspective of the Rebbe's Mashiach, whole take on the world, is that we're not dealing with, Mashiach is not some kind of a influence that comes at the time to save the world. That's not Mashiach. Mashiach is the godly revelation that comes as a result of thousands and thousands of years, thank you, of Judaism, Torah and mitzvahs, purification, opening up the world to a higher consciousness, which based on that, it's not a one-time event, it's an accumulation. And the Rebbe is basically saying it from the first mimer that he's an accumulation of 7 generations, so each one is Mashiach. That's what, by the way, explains his contradiction. The Rebbe says his father-in-law is Mashiach and he's Mashiach. Both are true. He's the final culmination of it. He's bringing it down. That's what the Rebbe is. I'm bringing it down into the material. It was started and was initiated in the earlier work in the earlier generation. So the Rebbe says, for instance, regarding the third Chabad Rebbe, who the Rebbe's namesake, who the Rebbe is named after, the Rebbe would write many times that Menachem, that his two names, Menachem Mendel, which are the Rebbe's own names, they are the names of Mashiach. Because regarding Mashiach, it says his name is Menachem, and Mendel is Gematria Tzedek. And Tzedek is one of the names that in Isaiah and Yeshaya it says about Mashiach. So I will add to you an interesting story. As we'll soon discuss, the notion of going public and speaking openly about the Lubavitcher Rebbe being Mashiach was something that was very, very, very strongly rebuked by the Rebbe himself. For most of the years of his leadership. And we're going to get to that in a few moments. But let me tell you an interesting story. In I'll tell you when this happened. If you find the right one. Oh, over here. In 19 Lamed Zayin, so this is in 1977. So there was Chabad had much opposition. The Rebbe knew that he has very few friends and a lot of opposition. We will understand that that makes sense. If you're going to break through and you're going to start and then do work that is to wrap things up, you're going to obviously do things that some people won't understand. And therefore, there was tremendous opposition to Lubavitch all along. Whatever the Rebbe did, the Rebbe had opposition. Even things that everybody today agrees on. Everybody agrees it's wonderful to reach Jews that are not observant and to bring them closer. But guess what? There was a lot of opposition to that. In the beginning, when the Rebbe did it, he was the first one, and everybody thought it was dangerous. It was not the right way to go. And to go on the street and get people to put on tefillin, people laughed at it, made fun of it, thought it's ridiculous, it's insane. When the Rebbe started a campaign that we should cry for Mashiach, everybody thought that's ridiculous. We should cry Ad Masai and things like that. No one does that. That's wild. That's not. So these were, whatever the Rebbe did, he had opposition. The Rebbe knew that he has to do what he does, even though there is an opposition, but the Rebbe did not welcome opposition. And he didn't thrive on opposition. He disliked the opposition. The Rebbe very much did not want there should be opposition, and the Rebbe wanted to minimize opposition as much as possible, because he needs to influence the Jewish people. He needs the Jewish people on his team. And therefore, to provoke them and anger them and upset them is not something that he did intentionally. If he needs to get something done, if millions of Jews need to put on tefillin, and somebody in some other community is not going to like it and get upset, the Rebbe is not going to refrain from doing that just because someone is going to get upset. Okay? But the Rebbe is not looking for opposition. One of the very sensitive issues was exactly this messianic element of Lubavitch that had the potential to cause enormous pushback against Lubavitch. So in 1977, there were some I don't know who they were exactly, who came out very strongly that Lubavitchers believe the Rebbe is Mashiach. Somehow they brought it to the front of the thing, and they were making a tumult about it. I mean, they were making a commotion about it. So some Lubavitcher leaders felt that the right thing to do was to put out a denial on it, was to go out and write maybe write something, a letter, sign it by the big rabbis in Lubavitch or the big leaders in Lubavitch, that we vehemently say it's not true. No one in Lubavitch believes the Rebbe is Mashiach. This was kind of the idea that people were thinking that should be done. Reb Zalman Gurari, I'm going to tell you what this booklet that I have is soon, but I'm just going to share with you now over here, this little portion. Reb Zalman Gurari, who is one of the big Chassidim in Lubavitch, right? If you watch many videos of the person who gets up and gives the Rebbe blessings in the name of everybody, he's a chosen representative many times. So he called Rabbi Chadakov, who's the Rebbe's secretary, to consult with Rabbi Chadakov about putting out such a official declaration in the name of Lubavitch that we do not believe that these are rumors, they're false rumors. So he was talking with Rabbi Chadakov, and Rabbi Chadakov on the phone was agreeing. Rabbi Chadakov on the phone from the Rebbe's office was in agreement that, yeah, this is probably the right thing to do, because we can't allow such a threat to Lubavitch. In the midst of Rabbi Zalman Gurari talking to Rabbi Chadakov goes silent. And for 2 minutes, you don't hear him. So Rabbi Gurari said, I knew that the Rebbe was got on the line or heard what was going on, and the Rebbe is now talking to Rabbi Chodakov and telling him behind the scenes. Rabbi Chodakov comes back on the phone, and he says these words. That he was a minute ago, 3-4 minutes ago, he was ready to say, to agree, put out a denial. Lubavitchers don't believe the Rebbe is Mashiach. He comes back suddenly after 2 minutes and he says these words. He doesn't say it in the name of the Rebbe, but he says, so what do you care, he says. The Gemara says, the Talmud says, that the Talmidim said on their teacher that he's fitting to be Mashiach. So that's just a little tidbit where you have a direct story where the Rebbe behind the scenes did not allow to shush it and to put out a denial. Even while the early days, and this is the chiddush of here, the novelty of here is, even though in this period of time that I'm going to be talking about, the Rebbe was not of approval that this Mashiach campaign, or that we should talk about Rebbe being Mashiach, should be in the public. Yet the Rebbe, on the other hand, would not allow what it seems like his secretary to give permission to the Hasidim to put out an official denial in the name of Lubavitch. So in other words, the Rebbe was protecting the Hasidim's rights to believe so. And I would have to add a very, very important thing. During the times of 1990, 1991, 1992, during that period of time, because the messianic fervor in Lubavitch was getting more intense and more intense and more intense, and beginning to spill out more and more and more, and causing a very big commotion in the Jewish world. And a lot of people were writing against it, including major newspapers in Eretz Yisrael, and there was a lot of opposition writing. And Hasidim didn't know what to do, because, like, on the one hand, the Rebbe had given them a lot of ammunition to support, especially, as I told you earlier, in the last years, the Rebbe started speaking like incredibly supporting of this. And Hasidim were like kind of back and forth and back and forth. And there was a lot of pushback coming. At that moment, the Rebbe knew what his Hasidim believe and what his Hasidim were saying. Had the Rebbe wanted, the Rebbe could have very, 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 very strongly and forcefully silenced the Hasidim, never to say it and to put an end to it. Not only didn't the Rebbe do that, but from week to week, if you learn the Sichos, if you learn the public talks, the Rebbe keeps on throwing teasers, not just teasers. The way I see it is like he's throwing, you know, you have a fire that's dying out and you throw a little kerosene. The Rebbe keeps on dashing kerosene on that fire from week to week, by Fabrengen after Fabrengen. He keeps on throwing these zingers out. Mashiach, Menachem, 770, base Mashiach, Nasi Ador is Mashiach, non-stop, week after week, which is astounding. It's clear that the Rebbe is in it. He's in it with the Hasidim. Two more very important, explicit statements regarding where the Rebbe spoke openly, in a very strong way, that it literally is communicating that he believes so, going back to that first question, and that he's okay with us knowing that he believes so. That's the point. He's not just okay, he's communicating it because he wants us to know it. One of them is during the Gulf War. Jews in Eretz Yisrael were terrified. Many Jews wanted to leave Israel, especially Americans wanted to come home. The Rebbe the entire year was encouraging Jews to stay in the land of Israel. It's the safest place. And with the miracles, we know what happened. Scuds came, buildings collapsed, but miracles upon miracles, people walked out unscratched. It was unbelievable. You can see there the Rebbe's vision, Ruach HaKodesh, divinely inspired, He's like a prophet. He was saying, don't be afraid, and he knows, he's taking the risk. God forbid, if who knows what can happen if God forbid people get hurt. Saddam Hussein has an arsenal of chemical weapons that he threatened to use, and he used it in other places, but the Rebbe said, don't worry about it. In the end, he didn't use it, and no one has an explanation why he didn't use it. It's phenomenal. It's clear that the Rebbe is speaking literally prophecy. During that time, the Rebbe is quoting the whole time that year, it brings a midrash where the Rebbe kept on saying it throughout the entire, starting in the end of 1990, all the way throughout the end of 1991. The Rebbe is continuously talking about the midrash which says that the year that Mashiach reveals himself, the year that Mashiach reveals him, not that Mashiach comes, the year that Mashiach reveals himself, there will be a lot of danger to the Jewish people coming from the Middle East, coming from Iran. The Rebbe explains in a Sikha how Iraq and Iran really, certain territory of Iraq is really Iranian territory, can be called Paras, and so on and so forth. And God says to the Jewish people, don't be afraid. Whatever I'm doing is for your sake. Don't fear. And then the Midrash continues that Mashiach himself stands on the roof of the Beis HaMikdash and he tells the Jewish people, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. The time of redemption has arrived. So the Rebbe keeps on saying that if you read the Sikhs, the Rebbe keeps on saying, this is the year, this event that's happening is the fulfillment of the Midrash, and which says that when Mashiach comes, this is what's going on. And what we are hearing is Mashiach's announcement, who is telling the Jewish people, don't be afraid. Now, where is Mashiach's? Now, you're saying, the Rebbe says it's God's announcement. No. Who else is going to speak to God if not for the Rebbe? So the Rebbe says, but where is Mashiach Tzidkenu? We're supposed to hear Mashiach. Where is Mashiach who's saying to the Jewish people, don't be afraid? So in one of the stunning talks in Parshas Chayei Sarah, Tavshin Nun Aleph, this is not Nun Beis, this is the year earlier, I spoke to you earlier, the 57, 52, and 57, 51, in the year Chayei Sarah, the Rebbe says that the Medrash says that Mashiach is standing on the roof of the Beis HaMikdash. Why on the roof of the Beis HaMikdash? Why out of all places on the roof? Simply say because it's a high place. But the Rebbe says no. That's alluding to that when it says the base, it doesn't mean literally he's in the Beis HaMikdash. And soon we'll see it. He adds something else somewhere else, but that doesn't mean literally. The roof is the one place in the Beis HaMikdash that didn't have the holiness of the Beis HaMikdash. Doesn't have the Gagin Loy Neskachu. The roof doesn't become holy. So the Rebbe says here, the reason why it says Mashiach is standing on the roof is to teach you that when Mashiach is making that announcement, he's not in a holy place. He's not even in the land of Israel. His announcement is coming from exile. And from exile, he's telling the Jewish people, don't be afraid. You can go to Eretz Yisrael, don't be afraid. So who exactly is the Rebbe referring to? Who is in Chutz Li'aretz, that he's outside of Eretz Yisrael. And he is the one who is telling everybody, don't be afraid. By dollars, the Rebbe used to give out dollars on Sunday. Hundreds of people go by. You can watch the videos of it. And people are asking the Rebbe, my child is in Israel. My father went. My own father, I was then learning in it. My father went to ask the Rebbe if he can bring me back for a shidduch. Then I got married. I came home. I met my wife. But that was the time when the Rebbe told everybody, don't bring home. Stay. Me, the Rebbe gave permission to come and then I got engaged. Right, beautiful. But the Rebbe then stay in Israel. Israel's the safest place. Don't be afraid. So the Rebbe is saying the announcement is coming. Wait, to make it even stronger, in a stunning sikha, in a stunning talk that he had published called Beis Rabbeinu Shebebavel, the house of our master in Bavel, the Rebbe talks about a stunning idea that just like we had a Beis HaMikdash, where the main place where the Shekhinah rests, the Beis HaMikdash moves from place to place, that during the time of the exile, the Shekhinah doesn't leave from the Jewish people, comes along with the Jewish people. And where does it go? Stays with the Jewish people in the diaspora, but primarily in the center of Torah of that generation. And where's the center of Torah? By the leader of the generation. And in an amazing talk, the Rebbe explained, and that's the Beis HaMikdash. That's the small Beis HaMikdash. And the Rebbe explains how, in the talk, he's very explicit. He says that in Europe, whatever, then it came to America. And where is that place? 770. That's the Beis Hamikdash temporarily in Golus. That's where the leader of the generation, when he speaks about the leader again, he speaks about his father-in-law, 770, and it influences the entire world and all this. And then he adds, when it says the announcement is coming from the roof of the Beis Hamikdash, the Rebbe says, which Beis Hamikdash is it referring to? It's not referring to the temple in Jerusalem that's going to be built when after Mashiach comes, spectacular revelation, and Mashiach is here and there's a temple in Jerusalem. It's not talking about the Beis Hamikdash there. Because the Rebbe says, oh, just a simple question. If the Beis Hamikdash is standing already, that means that the Arabs have been chased off the Temple Mount. Al-Aqsa has been there, removed. The temple, obviously everybody knows Mashiach is here. For that to happen, Mashiach is going to be here. So, Mashiach has to announce them and say, hello, the time of redemption has arrived. Well, who's he saying it to? To who is Mashiach saying that the time of the redemption has arrived? Everybody knows already. So the Rebbe says, no, we're talking about a time before the redemption, when people are still scared, they still have anxiety, and so on and so on. And when it says he's standing on the roof of the Beis Hamikdash, it's not referring to the Beis Hamikdash. We're talking about the mini temple that's with the Jewish people during the time of exile, which in that very talk says is 770. He clearly says it's there. And over there stands Mashiach Tzidkenu, and he tells the Jewish people, don't be afraid. If I was to tell you one of such talks, but I'm giving you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and here's another one. Parshas Mishpatim. I mentioned that this talk to you where the Rebbe says the 3 letters Mem Yud Aleph. Let's talk about Parshas Mishpatim. Tafshin Nun Aleph, Nun Beis. The Rebbe starts the talking about current events. He's talking about that the heads of state, President Reagan, I'm sorry, not President Reagan, President Bush Sr., Yeltsin from Russia, and various other world leaders came to New York City, and they signed a denuclear disarmament agreement. And the Rebbe goes into a long discussion, openly saying that who influenced that, why that's happening. This is the beginning of the prophecies of Mashiach materializing. And it's actually Mashiach Tzidkenu is impacting the nations to civilize them. For thousands of years, the nations were at war with each other, and spilling blood was not a problem in order to gain territory, in order to gain things. It was no problem to go and massacre people. But Mashiach is going to bring an end to all war, and he's going to make people sensitive to each other, and he's going to bring peace to the world. And only Mashiach himself, the man that the Rebbe emphasizes, not the era. The era is not what's going to influence. The person himself is going to influence nations, change the hearts of people. And the Rebbe said what happened that Friday in New York is a manifestation of Mashiach doing it. And how do you know? Number one, he says it happened on Friday. Friday is the Messianic time. It's the time of Mashiach. Number two, it happened in New York. Why did they do it in New York? Simply it's because of the UN. And the Rebbe explains what the UN, the whole thing. The Rebbe says the real reason you want to know, the inside reason, is because that's where the leader of the generation, that's where Mashiach Tzidkenu is. He's in New York. And therefore, now who is he talking about? The Mashiach that's in New York. And he says the reason why it had such impact is because that week, or the weeks earlier to that, the rabbis in Chabad signed a halachic document in which they proclaimed that the Rebbe has the criteria, everything that is fitting halachically to bring Mashiach. So the Rebbe says their declaration regarding Mashiach had such impact on the world that it's giving Mashiach strength and power to subdue the nations. So you're watching already the beginning of Mashiach's operation in the world, and it's happening. Based on all of this, it becomes very clear, and this is so important, that those who make the argument that the Messianic belief in the Rebbe being Mashiach, that's in Chabad and in Lubavitch, that it's a fringe group coming by a few radical people and whatever who had this belief, and some people these are the people who made it up, is simply not true. simply not true. It's either coming from ignorance, people who don't learn and don't study. So it's either ignorant, or it's a distortion. It's a deliberate distortion. The Rebbe clearly, not only did he approve of it, but he founded his entire Chabad movement as the seventh generation. He didn't found Chabad, but the entire energy of the seventh generation, that he sends out as emissaries across the entire world, and he makes all these mitzvah campaigns, and he reaches all corners. It all has a goal, it has a purpose, and he says it from when he starts, and he sticks to that goal all along. And the last 2 years, he culminates in a clear, not leaving any room for any way of seeing it any other way. Very clear words. The Rebbe, however, stops short by saying the words, I am Mashiach Tzedkein. And that needs understanding why. What also needs understanding, what also needs very, very much understanding, is when we address the fourth question and the fifth question. Did the Rebbe approve of his Hasidim announcing that he is Mashiach? Here is where my whole talk will take a very, very, very strong turn. The Rebbe very, 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 very forcefully and strongly rebuked and did what he can possibly to completely stifle such talk from being spoken. I shared with you before, I took out this booklet. Let me tell you what this is. A couple of years ago, when I started being more engaged in Mashiach topics, I met someone that I know is a friend of mine, a rabbi here in town, and we discussed it. And I know has a lot of inside knowledge. He was very. So he said to me that he knows someone who compiled a whole, I think it was like an Excel sheet. Maybe it's not an Excel. He made a whole table where he gathered together all the answers of what the Rebbe said throughout all the years regarding these questions. Rather, number one, identifying him as Mashiach, speaking about it publicly, making different campaigns for people to accept upon themselves the authority of Mashiach, and assuming that and committing themselves to the Rebbe, and so on and so forth. And he sent it to me, and I printed it out. And I did these pages, and I sat with this already a few times. But last week, when I gave this other class, actually last time when I gave this last week, I didn't sit down with it. The next day, when I was beginning to rehash it, and here is where things become very confusing. And it's not that I don't have an explanation. That's actually where I was coming from when I started my class, and I told you the two talks that the Rebbe gave, which are back to back, which seems to be conflicting one with each other. And if you came onto the YouTube later, it's worth listening to the beginning, because this will add a lot of clarity to how I want to resolve this whole conflict. And that is that there has been clearly very, very strong, when Hasidim ran out with this information, and they started saying it to the world, the Rebbe slammed down on it very strong. He clamped it down. He nipped it in the bud. What does that mean? When Chassidim, felt that here's the man we've been waiting for thousands of years, obviously that creates an enormous excitement and bubbling, and you want to share that with the whole world. You want to run out and scream to the world. And one of those Chassidim, his name was Rabbi Avram Paris. He was a devoted Chassid, like an incredible chassid. I'll tell you a quick story about him. So Avram Paris, he was a person that either won a lottery. He lived in Russia, very poor. Either he won a lottery, or he came across a huge sum of money. He found money that somehow landed by him, what's called a Metzia. It's something that he didn't work for, and he needed the money desperately. But he knew that the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe needs money to marry off his daughter. Which daughter? The daughter that married the Rebbe. For the marriage of the Rebbe and the Rebbe. I don't have the details of the story, but this is the general story. So when he picked up that money and he saw, wow, his first thought was that he should give the money to the Rebbe. And the entire money, he needs it. Poor family is starving. But he figured that, no, it's a huge amount of money. He was able to take care of all of his problems. So usually when we find money, well, we win a lottery, what do? So, obviously we have to say thank you to God. So we're going to give some tzedakah. So you give it your tithe, you give a tenth. You want to give 20%. Ooh, so you're giving 20%. If you're super, super benevolent and really think to give to God, you're going to give away half, but half you're going to keep to yourself. He felt that he doesn't deserve this money. Why does he deserve this money? Who is he? The Rebbe needs the money. And he didn't want to have a test. Because he knew his mind is going to start thinking maybe part of the money is mine. He took the entire money and somehow he sent it, I don't know how he sent it, whatever, he managed to send it to the previous Rebbe. And the previous Rebbe used that money to make the wedding of our Rebbe in Warsaw. That was the wedding expenses. From the money that this chassid sent him. Anyway, this Rebbe Avram Paris was one of these chassidim who already in the 1950s, 1960s was absolutely gung-ho Rebbe's Mashiach, and he felt that he has to notify this to the entire world. He went to Israel and he had printed up a whole bunch of leaflets in which he basically was in stating that the Rebbe is Mashiach and the whole Jewish world has to accept his leadership. Again, I don't have that leaflet. I can't tell you exactly what it was. I don't even think it had too much explanation. I think it was more or less just a very strong, a declaration. And he had printed thousands of such copies. I'm not sure if he had to go out with like a plane and they dropped the leaflets or something like that. He got a telegram that he received, and it says this is actually the words that were written there. The Rebbe says, "I am shocked from your letter and from your request, and Bakasha, I am immediately demanding," he says, "that you stop spreading this letter and this announcement. You should gather every single leaflet that has been spread out in Israel, every single one, and send it, and also send to my secretary all the remaining ones that you didn't yet distribute. And I want you to let me know instantly when this all was done." This was his immediate. So this happened in actually last week in terms of the date. Chav Dalet Sivan. We even have the date of when this was. The 24th day of Sivan in the year Tafshin Chav Hei in 1965. So that was the first chassid, I think, who made a outward attempt to try to who was so excited and wanted to go with it, and the Rebbe silenced him. 15 years later, 17 years later, in 1983, there was a big gathering in Tel Aviv. One of the speakers, in honor of the Rebbe and so forth, one of the speakers demanded at that talk, gave a fiery speech, and demanded at that talk that it's the business of the Chabad Rabbanim, the rabbis in Lubavitch, to paskin, to give a halachic verdict that the Rebbe is Mashiach. That's what he spoke. Okay, he spoke. But then they wanted to take his speech and they wanted to print it in the Kfar Chabad. Kfar Chabad is the official Chabad newspaper in Eretz Yisrael. Hebrew weekly magazine, if you can say. So the Rebbe, when the Rebbe found out that they want to do that, the Rebbe notified Rabbi Yeroslavsky, who was the rabbi today in Nachlas Har Chabad, and he told him that he should stand very strongly and not allow that to be printed in the Kfar Chabad. So the Rebbe shut it down. I have over here probably 20 answers. I'm just going to show you some pretty sharp ones. There was a fellow, a fine Yid, I'm not necessarily going to have to say his name. He wanted to print a book called Yechi HaMelech. He has that Sefer. It's a book that has been published. And this is in 1984. And in the book doesn't say it explicitly, but it has very, very strong implications. That official book published by a Chabad rabbi, where he's very strongly suggesting in a way that anybody that reads the book will obviously understand who he's referring to, but he doesn't say it openly, and basically very strongly indicating that the belief that the Rebbe is Mashiach. So the Rebbe, this is Rabbi the person himself, I always gave it away, said as follows, that he testified that he received a telephone call from, who was the one who called him, I'm not exactly sure, from the Rebbe's secretary. And the Rebbe said to him, it seems like you make yourself as if you don't know what I told you earlier, that you are going to damage, you're going to bring enormous damage to Lubavitch, to Chabad, and to the spreading of Hasidus, through writing about this. And when I spoke about it, I meant you more than I knew what's going on in your heart, and I meant you. And I am warning you, very strong words, that you should stop this, or write about it, or spread it out, or definitely not to print it. And you shouldn't write at all about Mashiach. Stick away from, just go on to a different subject. Don't write it under your name, or don't try to find a how do you call it, a fictitious name of someone else, or do it through a shliach, or do it in any type of trick. The Rebbe uses the words be'eza kunsheyeh, any type of trick that you might want to make. And if chas v'sholem, if God forbid you're going to do this, you should know for sure, hear these words, that this is, you're waging war against me particularly. And this simply includes also writing explanations on Rambam and on Hasidus about Mashiach. I want you off the subject completely. Pretty sharp. Very intense. After he received such an answer, he was very shocked, and not shocked, but he was very shooken up. He sent in a letter for asking for mechila, for forgiveness. And that because the Rebbe says, you're hurting me, you're waging war against me. So he asked it, and the Rebbe says, chas v'sholem, there was nothing, I don't have any personal, thing against you. It's not chas v'sholem that I just want to rein you in. But and the Rebbe says, the reason why I'm telling you to stop, the Rebbe gives a very explicit reason. The reason I'm telling you to stop is because you saw literally that by spreading this information, you're causing many people to distance themselves from Lubavitch and from Hasidus. And it's very important that we have to spread Hasidus. In order for Mashiach to come, we have to spread Hasidus. And by you saying this information, people say Chabad, right? People say, oh, Chabad is a cult or whatever, a messianic cult. And therefore, they're fighting against the Torah of the Baal Shem Tov. And and including people who till now already started learning Hasidus. But by you saying this, you're causing them to stop learning Hasidus because they don't want to have anything to do with this. That's basically this answer. The Rebbe addressed it one time during a Farbrengen. I'm first giving you all the answers where the Rebbe clamped down like with such sharpness to stop it. Here's another one. This was a public address that the Rebbe gave in Parshas Bereshis, Tafshem Mem Hey, which is 1984. It's Shabbos Bereshis is still 84. It's not yet 85. 1984, Shabbos Bereshis, probably October time. What happened was, during the Farbrengen, people started singing a song. There's a famous song in Lubavitch called Inyono, which talks about the Rebbe's armies and so forth. And it generally says how the Rebbe is like a big general and his armies will go and they'll conquer the world. And the words were Chayale Adeinu Mareinu V'Rabbeinu. Chayale Harebi, I don't know what the initial words were. But the people started slowly because of this intense messianic fervor. So someone started singing during the Farbrengen, someone started singing Chayale Adeinu Mareinu V'Rabbeinu Melech HaMashiach. This is what they, or Chayale Harebi Mashiach Decoded, where they sang openly that the Rebbe is Mashiach. So the Rebbe, during the Farbrengen, stopped the song You see? The Rebbe interrupted the song, and the Rebbe said these words. They didn't find anything else to sing. Only such a song that can distance Jews from learning Hasidus is the only thing you can think about. And the Rebbe went into a very strong condemnation against the book that I mentioned to you before, that they wanted to publish. And the Rebbe, of course, didn't mention the publisher, the author of it, but the Rebbe speaking, and everybody was clear who the Rebbe was talking about. The Rebbe says there are people who are spitz Chabad, which means they're like the sharpest of Chabad, who think that they know what you need to do and how you have to conduct yourself. And everybody around them doesn't know. And if anybody wants to tell them what to do, right, they don't want to listen to anybody, because they think that who is anybody else to tell them what to do? Because no one is such a Lubavitcher like they are. And therefore, the Rebbe says, I am intentionally intending, the Rebbe is saying this publicly, that as a result of speech in which they printed things, or they sing songs. He doesn't say what the songs are, but everybody knows what the Rebbe was talking about. They caused tens of Jews to distance themselves from Hasidus. They caused people to go away from Hasidus and from in the ways of Hasidus, from conducting themselves. And even Jews who started learning Hasidus stopped learning Hasidus because of this work. And therefore, this doesn't bring anybody closer. It's only causing distancing. And even if you try to enclose it in a holy endeavor, in a holy garment, it doesn't change the bottom line. Bottom line is it's having a good effect or a negative effect. And therefore, the Rebbe says, you want to sing a Hasidic niggin? There are so many songs you can sing. You want to speak Hasidus? You want to speak words you want to spread Hasidus? There's so many words of so much subjects of Hasidus you can talk about. Go in the path that our teachers have paved. No one needs your innovations. Hear these words. No one needs your innovations. The only benefit that's going to come out of it is a new war against the Baal Shem Tov, against the Alter Rebbe, Rahman al-Islam. So therefore, sit and learn Hasidus, learn how to daven better, learn how to be a better Jew, and the main thing is that the Maimer should teach you. Fine. And therefore, the Rebbe says, let it be known that anybody that continues to do something like this, he is fighting against Hasidus Chabad, he's fighting against the Rebbe himself, he's fighting against the Baal Shem Tov, and he's fighting against Mashiach. Because Mashiach wants to come, but he needs that they should spread Hasidus all over the world. He needs more spreading of Hasidus. And since you're not allowing Hasidus to be spread, because this is causing people to be distanced from it, so therefore, and then the Rebbe says, let it be Hashem's will, that we shouldn't have to repeat this warning again, and whatever, and we should all do whatever we need to do, and fine. So I couldn't have been more explicit in showing you that the Rebbe is so fervently, sharply, wow. And based on this, I would say, like, what's the point of my whole talk that I've given to you now over here? After I know what the Rebbe said over here, why am I still talking? And it would be terrifying to speak. I'll tell you one more sharp thing. The Rebbe actually said in a few years later already, in Mem Tes, in 1949, not 49, 89. So this is already closer again. The main intense Mashiach years were 1991, 1992. But in 89, the Rebbe called someone into his room, and the Rebbe spoke 15 minutes about it. And then the Rebbe expressed himself. One of the things, this is again, someone who had this conversation where the Rebbe said to him, they are ripping flesh off of me. Such sharp words. It would seem like it's clear cut. No. It's notwithstanding everything the Rebbe says, but no. But you have to understand something. In 1990, 80, this is all going on in the 80s. 1990, 91, and 90, 92, where the Rebbe himself starts talking and saying things that that maybe in the early years was hinted to with a tiny little hint. The Rebbe is now speaking openly. What did it do to the Hasidim? it started creating by the Hasidim a sense that maybe now the time has changed, because they saw how the Rebbe is changing his tone. As a result of that, especially after a stunning talk where the Rebbe said on the 28th of Nisan, the Rebbe said, I did everything I could, and now I am giving it over to you. Do everything you could to bring Mashiach. At that time, there were many, many Hasidim and many people who believed that now things have changed and the time has come to start speaking more openly, embracing this, spreading this. And here's the amazing thing. In addition to the talks that the Rebbe was giving week after week after week, in which the Rebbe was like firing this Mashiach talk, in addition to that, the Rebbe allowed, not just allowed, but actually encouraged the very same things that he didn't let earlier. The first thing is that very book that the Rebbe so vehemently, so to speak, pushed away and didn't let this rabbi publish. In 1991, this same person sent in, and he knew very well, he was daring enough to send into the Rebbe and saying, based on the previous talks, maybe now the time has come that we could publish it. The Rebbe says, if you're going to give, and the Rebbe answered it, if you give it over to a few people who will look it over and they'll remove from it those things that are very explicit, indicating that, then you should publish it. So he did that. The Sefer Yechia Melech, he had it looked over by Rabbi Menachem Brod, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Vechter, various different people. They looked over, they took out of it certain things that were a little too, they felt was a little too exposing, if you can say. He sent it into the Rebbe, and the Rebbe gave huge blessings, go ahead and print it. In other words, the very same opposition in 1945, 1985, 5 years later, or even 89, where the Rebbe said, no, 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 now things changed. I do want to make a little introduction. A little simple introduction. Because when it comes to, for example, the secrets of the Torah, the secrets of the Torah was something that had to be kept secret. And if someone revealed those secrets before their time, it was considered one of the most serious violations of Torah. The secrets of Torah were given over to only a selected few throughout the generations. Came the Holy Arizal and said, now as the time has come, as we get closer to Mashiach, that we're supposed to teach those teachings. And we're supposed to spread them across the entire world. But there is a time that is not. But when the time comes, what was once a sin became a mitzvah. The Arizal says it's a mitzvah to reveal and to teach these teachings. So one has to, especially when one is going along with the rhythm of time, and we're moving more and more and more and more and more and more into Mashiach, certain things about Mashiach, which initially is more concealed and more hidden. If you think about it, all the Chabad Rebbes were always all about Mashiach, but they didn't speak much about Mashiach. Only the fifth Chabad Rebbe started already talking about about setting the foundations for Malchus Beis David. He did the Friediger Rebbe. Compared to his names, he was like really extreme, so much so that there was a huge opposition against him, that this whole accusation, Chabad and Messianism, started still by the days of the sixth Chabad Rebbe, the Friediger Rebbe. But obviously by the Rebbe, it took on a whole new role, and especially in the last 2 years. So let me give you a couple of answers that happened in the last 2 years that showed you the complete opposite, where the Rebbe not only allowed, but he agreed, and he even encouraged. He was at the same time that earlier he had, and it comes very, very, very slow. It came in increments, slowly. Yes and no, and then more yes, more yes, more yes. And at the same time that there are yeses, there are also no's. But the yeses, the later you're going, the more the yeses are dominating, and the no's are becoming less and less and less and less. And the yeses are becoming more and more and more. And the blessings that are coming along for those that are doing it is becoming more explicit and stronger and encouragement and so on and so forth. I don't have time in today's class to go through this entire booklet with you, because there's probably a few, I would say a few hundred, not a few hundred, probably, I don't know, I would say 70 to 100 answers, each one. Who asked, what the answer was, how did it come, who's the one who, he has like a table over here. This is the date. This is what the question was, or what the subject was. This is the answer. And this is, he writes over here, who these are from, meaning he collected it. One person went and he collected everything that there is. Now, to say that he got everything, I don't know. There might be some people with some private answers. I did go through this book, and based on my understanding of what I'm getting from the end, is exactly what I'm telling you. There was a very, very, very strong opposition, very strong. The Rebbe didn't let it at all. He lightened up, and in the end, more and more, that he gave his consent, and he gave his, not only that. Let me give you an example. In 1992, the Rebbe was, during these talks, where the Rebbe was going gang-ho, stronger Mashiach, the Rebbe said that now we're at a time that we did everything already. Tshuva, the repentance that was necessary in order to bring Mashiach, we've done already. The spreading of Hasidus that was necessary, that should reach the whole world for Mashiach to come, one of the conditions of Mashiach to come, we've done already. The amount of Torah and mitzvahs that were necessary to bring enough holiness in the world to bring Mashiach, we've done already. The sparks of holiness that needed to be elevated in order for Mashiach to come, we've elevated every last spark. These were all statements that the Rebbe made in the last years. And all this was done already. And the Rebbe said the only thing that's still left to do, this is in Parshas Noach, is it's only dependent on Mashiach himself. And therefore, the Rebbe says we have to be very, very careful. He goes on to speak that we have to be careful in Kiddush Levana. Kiddush Levana is once a month. You go out and you sanctify the new moon, which is like a strange thing. Like everything is done, now we have to do Kiddush Levana. In that talk about Kiddush Levana, the Rebbe mentions a pasuk, Uvikshu Eselakeya and David Malcolm, that when we go and we sanctify the new moon, it's our way of going out to greet Mashiach. Because the new moon represents the king of David, the offspring of David, the Mashiach who's going to rise. And that's like the moon coming back. It's a lot, too much to discuss on a YouTube video, what that means, but that's what the Rebbe said. The women in Crown Heights at that time were inspired by this. And they decided to go and to make it was a few events, and I'm not going to go through them. But they basically said to the Rebbe that because of the Hiskashrus of the Cave as David Malcolm, which means that at the end of days it says the Jewish people will seek out Mashiach Tzidkenu, they hereby are signing a acceptance letter that they are accepting upon themselves the leadership and the kingship of the Rebbe, of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, that you are Mashiach. And we, therefore, as women, are now subservient and giving ourselves over to be your subject. It didn't start with the women. It started a few months earlier. Hasidim were doing it. Men were doing it. People were doing it. And the Rebbe was giving already many answers of thank you and let it continue. But when the women did it, Hiskashrus Elokayim as David Malcolm. So, at that time, it's over here. I have to find the right. I wrote my notes on it, but there's so much over here. I don't want to. Oh, it was actually 10 women who came to the Rebbe, and they brought the Rebbe an envelope. This was on Hoshana Rabbah, the last day of Sukkot, 57, 52. And they had, you can actually see it on a video. It's on a video. It's not, and they accepted they had handed to the Rebbe this envelope of them accepting the Rebbe's kingship. And the spokeswoman amongst them said, we are here. We are a minyan. We are 10 women together. We are a stiff-necked people. And we are asking of the Rebbe that he should reveal himself publicly as Melech HaMashiach, and he should take us out of exile. Okay? This is a group of women, The Rebbe says, Amen, Atzlacha Rabba. Okay? Amen, great success. Besudas Tov is good news. This is for the letter, and this is for the names that you gave me. Fine. So the Rebbe is not shunning it, not dismissing it. He gives them Amen, fine. After Yom Tif, because they felt that they got kind of a wink, some kind of an endorsement from the Rebbe, they decided to make a gathering. The women decided to make a special gathering, a kinnus, a gathering of women, in which they are officially welcoming Mashiach, a welcome Mashiach gathering, and where they're. And they sent the invitation to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe says, "I will take it to my father-in-law's grave." What the Rebbe would say about all the blessings, and the time is ripe. These words, "Vazman gerama," the time and now is ripe. Okay. The next. There's a few, but I want to get to one that's really, really stark. Okay, so there was one gathering the woman gave, and the Rebbe gave a lot of endorsement. But here was some really, really amazing ones. So in the winter of Tevis, Chodesh Tevis, Tavshin Nun Beis, the women, Neshei Chabad, this is already the Neshei Chabad, this wasn't just a small group of women, this is the official organization, Neshei Chabad in Crown Heights, made a big Malava Malka, which means a meal Mata Shabbos, and it was called the meal Kabbolas Panim for Mashiach Decoded. So right when they started, this before they got to finalizing it, just when they started, they notified the Rebbe about it. The Rebbe said, Asker al Atzion, I will mention it. Vazman Garama, and the time is ripe for this. And V'yeh Batzlacha Rabba, let it be with great success. So he knows that they're making a gathering where officially they're going to declare him as Mashiach. And the Rebbe is saying, let it be with great Atzlacha. Okay. Then the women decided, here's the thing, the next phase, that they shouldn't leave it local. They should broadcast it to Chabads all over the world so that other places can participate from the far. This is when technology was not like you have today. This was still, but they were still able. This is in 1991, right? You're still able to kind of use satellite and whatever. The Rebbe gives a blessing for it. It should be, and you should continue. All this should continue. Now, while this is a very strong one, while this gathering of the women was taking place, one of the Rebbe's attendees, Reb Chaim Baruch Halberstam, wrote into the Rebbe a note from what was going on, and in the heading he wrote, because he was the one in charge of the satellite production, so he wrote, "This is a broadcast from the Kabbolas Panim, the greeting party to Kveit Kedushas Ad Mashlita Melech HaMashiach, to the Rebbe who is the King Mashiach, through Neshei U'Bnei Chabad." And the Rebbe's answer to him, Chuas Chein, which means like thank you, and a very happy thank you. But thank you on the enormous satisfaction you're causing me. On the satisfaction you're causing, that you caused and you're continuing to cause. Asker al Atzion, I'm going to mention it on my father-in-law's grave. Or resting place, rather, I should say grave, resting place. Now, the Sheikh Chabad, after that event, the women, the same group, the women of Chabad, but in London, wrote to the Rebbe about the various different work they are doing to spread Mashiach. And they wrote, they're having lectures and they're having pamphlets they're giving out. You hear this? It is amazing. So he's told now what we got was that people sent and the Rebbe gave thank you. Did the Rebbe ever encourage the next stage? So watch this one. They didn't write that they made a gathering for the Rebbe being. They speak about, the Rebbe at that time said we should teach the world about Mashiach and inspire. So they wrote that's what they're doing. The Rebbe's answer was, Niskabel, I received it. Varmatzurbas and everything that was here. V'chuas chen, and thank you. That's the year Batzlacha Rabba, let it be with great success. Ubetach, the Rebbe says, definitely. Oimedes bekesher and the Sheikh Chabad Tichieno Dekan. I'm sure the Rebbe says that the branch in London is in contact with the branch of Chabad here in New York to know about their recent gathering that they had just recently. Al Devar Chagidos and Kan Asker Alatzin. So the Rebbe is telling the women in London that amongst your, basically, if I'm interpreting correctly, that amongst what you're telling me, it's nice, but you haven't taken it to the next stage. You should be in touch. Definitely you're in touch about with the women over here who have taken it and find out what they did. Wow. Now let's go. Talking about, the change, what was once forbidden, which would have been, whoa, how dare you say that or do something like that, is suddenly changing and shifting. Here's the next one. Also the women. The women, Bechlal, are the ones who lead the way to Mashiach, as we know. The Rebbe spoke about that many times. In Jerusalem, same organization, a Sheikh Chabad in Jerusalem, wanted to make, at that time, this is in 1992, a gathering like this. And what was going to be, they wanted to have a gathering, women would gather, and everybody would sign, people would sign a document accepting upon themselves the Rebbe as Mashiach. And there were many women who felt, no, you're not allowed to do that. It would, exactly for the reasons we said earlier. It's going to disturb the spreading of Hasidus, because Hasidim knew how vehemently, if you can say, the Rebbe didn't allow it. So there were those who are more and there were those who were more no. And they decided. And because they didn't know what to do, and they didn't want to, God forbid, decided that both sides, the leaders on both sides, would send their own letters and they would bring it to the Rebbe together. And let's see what the Rebbe, these people wrote that we should do so and so, and these people wrote what we shouldn't do. Rabbi, as follows. When the first letter, the first one, which said that we should do it, the Rebbe said, let it be a great and auspicious time. Asker Alatzin, I'm going to mention in Alatzin. Then the Rebbe took the second, which said that we shouldn't do it. The Rebbe looked at it for a while, and it said that because the reason, and he said explicitly, they don't want to do it because it's going to cause people to be distant. The Rebbe looked at it for a while. Then the Rebbe asked, give me back the first letter. The Rebbe looked at the first letter, put it on top of the second one, and after looking at it, he took the one that was saying that we shouldn't do it, he put it on the side. He returned the first letter back to the secretary, and he said, give them over this answer. According to what I know from other sources, is that the Rebbe said, that one the Rebbe took with him to the oil. That's what I heard Rebbe Leibel Grona say elsewhere. The Rebbe said, I'll take that one to the oil. That one he took, but this one he gave back and said, this is the answer. Which the answer was, let it be. So here it was placed in front of him directly, yes or no, and he said, yeah. Now, tons of answers, but sometimes like this, sometimes like that. And the question is obviously, come on, it's not fair to be confusing. It's not right to be confusing, especially on such a sensitive matter. Hasidim want to do the right thing. No Chassid wants to upset the Rebbe. So why is the Rebbe giving answers like this, and yes, and no, and yeah, and yes? So obviously the most important differentiation is you have to realize the time change. Before 1990 is a whole different time. Like we've spoken many times, before 1990 is still not yet the time of Mashiach. From 1990 and onward, the Rebbe will refer to that time, the time of redemption has arrived. So obviously, the amount of revelation that is allowed for in this particular time is a whole different level than what is allowed for before. That's a given. The other thing is very interesting, is that I think is the most telling and most important answer. It's very pivotal. It will explain a lot. I just want to find it. Oh. At the same time, we don't. He writes over here Chassid Tarikh. He doesn't have the exact date, but this was in 57, 52. Okay, so this is has to be within a period of 5 months from the beginning of 57, 52, which is 1992, not yet 1992, then it's 1991 until Adar. The Sheikh Chabad in Crown Heights wrote to the Rebbe a plan in which they want to come out with a campaign. This is not just about them accepting the Rebbe as Mashiach, but to actually publicize the identity of Mashiach to the whole world. In other words, they were going to go out with a ad campaign and they were writing like how exactly they were going to do it. The answer that they got was as follows, and I think this is like the striking answer. It said, "Tafkid kol hanhola v'hanal b'chlolam l'nal kefi sichlam." All of the objective or the job of every hanhola. Hanhola means every leading position, and including that, which means the leaders of the Sheikh Chabad, is to lead their group according to their understanding, according to their mind, but not to ask me, and that I should contemplate, which would mean, hear these words, which would mean that I'm the one that is conducting the affairs. And therefore, don't ask me. It's enough if you just let me know what you're doing. Ask a relative. The Rebbe didn't take it and throw it out the window, say, don't do it. The Rebbe said clearly, I don't like the fact that you're asking me if you should publicize me. Do as your mind tells you. In other words, I have given you enough information based on what I've taught you and said in the Sikhs that you have already enough information. Now, if based on that information, you are propelled and you know that Mashiach has already revealed and he's already spoken. The Rebbe said it in the Sikhs of Nun Beis, another very interesting thing. The Rebbe said, not only do we have the existence of Mashiach, but we have already that Mashiach is revealed already. And as I told you, so many Sikhs. So the Rebbe says, based on all that information, use your own seichel. Don't come to me and ask me, because what's the problem? If you're asking me and I am telling you, then I'm the one conducting it. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with the fact that he would be conducting it? Why would that be a problem in the least bit that he himself is conducting it? And the answer to that is, going back to this entire discussion that we had earlier regarding the entire process of Mashiach coming into the world, that Mashiach's revelation and coming into the world cannot be superimposed on the world. It's something that must come from within the creation itself, or within the world itself. And that includes all aspects of Mashiach's coming. That it involves a participation, it involves an elevation, it involves a partnership with the creation, where the world itself is participating. But even more than anything else, it involves the Mashiach himself. Mashiach is a king. A king is only a king if his people have accepted him. A king is not a king if he superimposes himself upon them. The whole kingship doesn't work. That's a tyrant. That's a or whatever they call it. A king is someone, as we say in Kiblu, that's someone that needs to be accepted by the people, willfully, not in a way that he is dominating it, or that he is forcing it upon them. Which leads us to the last question, which is a very, very important question. Because as I asked you right in the beginning of the class, why in the world do we even feel that this is important information? And this is like the really best question. And I'm going to get back to what I was just talking about in a minute, because I know the share is going a little longer than I thought, but it's important. Why is this even important? Why do you have to even get into this murky situation? It's uncomfortable. There's this. Let it be. Whenever Mashiach has to come, Mashiach will come, and he'll come. Fine, leave it alone. Who says it has anything to do with what do we have to identify? What do we have to look at someone? It feels almost childish, almost immature. Sophisticated people will say, you know what, this is silly. It doesn't make a difference. Care about yourself. Be a good person. Do what you're supposed to do. I wish that responsibility wouldn't be our responsibility. I wish it could be that way. One of the interesting statements the Rebbe made in Parshas Mishpatim, the first Parshas Mishpatim 57-51, these are the last words of the Sikha, you can look it up. The Rebbe says that the Rebbe says these words, that Mashiach was already appointed. In their Minui von David Malka Mashiach is doch schon gewesen. Mashiach was already appointed from heaven. Ksav, like it says, Matzasi David Avdi, I have found David my servant. B'Shem and Kachi Meshachtev, I have anointed him with my anointing oil. As darf nor zayin Kabbolas Malchus Yadei Am. The only thing that's necessary is that we have to receive and accept his kingship by the people. In the Hiskashrus zwischen der Melech mit dem Am, and the deep bond between the king and the people. What is the Rebbe saying over here? When David HaMelech, this is a very pivotal point. When King David was anointed by God, King David is the originator of the Davidic dynasty. The Davidic dynasty involves a human being, obviously, that's a king, who God appoints. You can't self-appoint yourself. Hashem has to appoint you. David HaMelech was appointed by Hashem himself. He sent Shmuel HaNavi, his prophet, to appoint King David. And the prophet came and he put the special anointing oil on King David, hands down. There's nothing to talk about. David HaMelech is the anointed one. He is what's called, the Rambam refers to Mashiach HaRishon, the first Mashiach. He is Mashiach really means anointed. He's anointed by God. Yet King David does not have the authority of a king, and his kingship has not been in any way fortified, other than the fact that we know that God chose him. That choosing and the anointing oil gave him enormous light and enormous power, and it elevated him above all human beings. But in the practical, literal sense, he is not at all a king yet, because a king must be accepted by his people. And King David, you can look in Shmuel. I don't have the Shmuel right in front of me to tell you which chapters, but I've given classes about this before. Over there it discusses how, after he was anointed, King Saul was still the king then, so for sure he wasn't king yet. But even after King Saul passed away, and David HaMelech was accepted as a king, he was only a king at Hebron. He wasn't really the true king of the Jewish people, until a man by the name of Avner, who was the general of Shaul HaMelech, and was also the general of Shaul HaMelech's son, who did not surrender, who did not give himself over to David HaMelech's kingship, who started, was his own king, and had the rest of the Jewish people following him, not King David, until Avner went and he campaigned, and he went across the land, and he gathered all the Jewish people to come to King David, and only after the people came to him and said, "You are our king," so King David was their king. The reason is very simple. Ein melech b'lo yam. Kingship cannot work without a people. It cannot work without people. A king needs a nation, and a nation has to subserviently, willfully, and happily and excitedly surrender to their king and accept him as their king, or else it doesn't work. I ask, obviously, the obvious question. If it's so not important who the Rebbe is, and whether the Rebbe is Mashiach, if it's all that information is not important, why in the heaven's name that the Rebbe, Tzaddik, Kodesh Kadosh, speaking to us, he has, whether the Rebbe knows that he would have a stroke, whatever, we know Tzaddikim, they can see into the future. We know that. The Rebbe knows he's already 90, he's 91, he's getting older. He knows he has not that much time, so to speak, to be spending with us, talking to us. So why does he take the last 7 months or 9 months and non-stop deliver this message again and again from all the talks? If it's so unimportant, if it's utterly unnecessary, why are we giving us this information? Why do we have to know it? It's only making us crazy. It's driving us insane. It really does, because if you know Mashiach is around the corner, you can't stay quietly and like whatever. You just create such energy and you want to run around. No, you can't say. Obviously, the information was given to us so that we should do something with it. However, what? It has to come from us. It has to come from the people. Now, but hold it, but if it's so important that, so why was the Rebbe saying the whole time, no? First of all, then it was before the time. I'll give you a little metaphor for this. If you're working on a project, there's a whole company working on a project, and the project is to send, a rocket to the moon. That's the first time we're sending a rocket to the moon. And everybody's excited, you're ready, and then someone wants to send the rocket a little too early. You're so excited, you got it. And the guy is there, so I say, hold it, calm down. And then, no, we have a rocket, we can send it, we have already this. So if you're gonna launch the rocket before the rocket is ready to be launched, then you're gonna defeat the opposite. Everything, you're gonna do the opposite. First of all, what's gonna happen is it's gonna fail. And when it's gonna fail, what's gonna happen? Maybe the investors are gonna see it's failing, they're gonna say, oh, the project's not working, they're gonna drop the project, they're gonna stop giving money to it. Or the people are gonna lose their enthusiasm because they see it's not happening. Do you understand? So you got to be very careful. To send the rocket out but at the time when it's not yet finished, and you let the rocket go, then the very sending of it, and obviously the excited guys who've been working on this for 20 years or 30 years, and they've almost have it, they might be tempted to launch early. And you have to have the patience. Say, don't launch yet. And that's what the Rebbe was doing clearly. Don't launch yet. But still, you know what the objective is. The objective is to send the people on the moon, on this rock. You got to do it. But if you do it too early, it's suicide. You're going to be killing these people. You're going to be it's bloody murder. You're killing these people. That's what the Rebbe is saying the whole time. The Rebbe never denied it. The Rebbe is clearly indicating that this is the truth. He's saying, but right now, there's other work that needs to be done. We can't send the rocket until everything is finished. What has to be finished? Chassidus needs to be spread. These things need to be done. And only when we're done, then we can send the rocket. Now, who knows when we're done? I can't decide when we're done. You can't decide when it's done, but the only one who could is the manager of the project. And the manager of the project is the one who's directing the whole thing, and that is the Rebbe. And therefore, when the Rebbe started speaking these talks and telling us all this information, is because at that time, this information was important. Because now we could use this information. We are ready to launch. However, it needs education. It needs teaching. The way to launch is not to run around with a banner and scream Rebbe's Mashiach. Not necessarily. That's not gonna really, people won't hear that. You need to educate. So the Rebbe, in 1992, the last gathering of all the shluchim, everybody can read that sikha. The Rebbe explains very clearly that the shluchim, his emissaries, have no other business anymore. We finished the regular work of shluchus. All the work that Chabad has been doing to prepare the world for Mashiach is done already. We prepared the world. The world has been rectified. The world has been fixed. Now we need to do a special new work to make the people actually ready to come greet Mashiach. To come greet Mashiach Tzidkenu himself. And that's the mess. That's what we have to do. So what does that mean? To go greet Mashiach Tzidkenu. So number one, as I mentioned earlier, this particular shlichus, or this particular job, which is very important for Mashiach to operate, is that Mashiach should have a backing. He should have he should have a following, a power. And that's what gives him power. His power comes, he needs the cheerleading of his people. Literally. He needs that power behind him in order to accomplish his incredible messianic power and his incredible godly achievements. It's him together with the people. But he can't tell you to go make him king. He can't do that because that's not a kingship. That's insane. The people need to come on their volition and ask the king to be their king, not that he tells them. But if he knows this is his mission, he can hint it to them. He can kind of give them clues. He can say, hey, guys, hey. But it can't be coming from him. So first of all, in the earlier years, we have other work to do. We have to do a lot of preliminary work that we need to take care of. That's number one. But even after the work is done, it can't be coming from him. It has to be our initiation. It has to come from the people. And it has to come with the proper education. When the Rebbe was asked, and it's a shame, I can go through many other answers. The Rebbe was told, when a the same rabbi that I told you who wrote the book, which the Rebbe so warned him, when that rabbi was invited to a certain place in Eretz Yisrael, I can't even tell you which town it was. And I know that rabbi over there, maybe in Lud, and the rabbi over there, his name is Rabbi Yurkowitz, and he invited this rabbi to come and to give a speech, and in that speech, the point of it was that he was going to talk about the Rebbe being Mashiach. Clearly, it was, and again, this is a time when it was still very, everybody was scared. So they wrote into the Rebbe. There were some people in this community that didn't like it. They wrote into the Rebbe that our Rabbi Yurkowitz, invited this rabbi to give a speech, and the content of the speech is going to be that the Rebbe is Mashiach. But we don't feel that is okay. But our rabbi says it is okay. Should we go ahead with the speech or not? And the Rebbe answered, the rabbi is ein l'dayan el ma she'ein evroyes. These are the words. A judge can do what he sees. And if your rabbi sees that this is the right and the people obviously are ready to receive it, then go ahead. The Rebbe gave a bracha for it. The same is true. Rabbi Bernard from South Africa wrote a letter to the Rebbe in which he said that based on all the talks that the Rebbe was saying, should we then therefore in South Africa go ahead and give over the information and speak about the Rebbe being Mashiach? But he said that our rabbi, I think Rabbi Lipsker or whatever, is not of the opinion we should do it. So the Rebbe said it's dependent on Chabad in each place, and Chabad in each place should evaluate if people are ready to receive it. If they're not ready to receive it, then they're not ready for it. Ala Chabad, ala Sar Levarer, to clarify. But as a dear friend of mine says, it means find out if the people are ready, and if they're not ready, then you have work, Levarer. So you need to do some more refining. You need to more clarification. You need to teach. So where does this lead us all? It's right before Gimel Tammuz. It's 28 years later. The Rebbe gave us already a prophecy that Mashiach is at the door. The Rebbe said Mashiach Tzidkenu is here already. The Shara Bar and the Leviathan are here already. I personally believe every word the Rebbe said 100%. To me, it's not he dreamt, he wanted, he thought, to me, that's all Baba Mises. It's 100% because I mentioned so fiery in the last talk I gave, which I deleted. And I heard from someone who said, he said from an old chassid, a chassid said that if something is 99.99 true, imagine, 99.99 true, so you think that's pretty true. He said, no, that's 100% not true. Because true is only truth, is absolute. If it's 99.99 true, then it's 100% not true. I can't take the Rebbe unless I take the whole thing, from the beginning to the end. The Rebbe is a godly man. When the Rebbe speaks, Hashem is speaking through him. 28 years later, it doesn't make any sense. We're still sitting in exile. I'm not here to kvetch about the past. I'm just saying, so maybe there is something. Do we need all the Jewish people in the entire world to get behind the Rebbe? No, I don't think so. Just like the Rebbe said, when the Rebbe said we finished doing tshuva, does it mean that every Jew did tshuva? The Rebbe says every Jew had a hitter tshuva. Only a Rebbe can say that. Is every single Jew religious? No. Is every single? No. But the Rebbe said it's enough. There needs to be an Esoidus, something. The problem people have, and that's the big issue. But Gimel Tammuz, this would all be good if there wasn't Gimel Tammuz, which means there wasn't a time where the Rebbe, to our physical eyes, passed away. But now that the Rebbe passed away in Gimel Tammuz, so this kind of knocks the whole thing off. It knocks the whole thing off because, once he's not here anymore, then. So I want to say something. Part of the klipa, part of the unholy, part of the job of the Satan, especially you realize that satanic forces are going to get very involved to stop the Geula. There's no question, to try to mess things up. You can't stop it because it's inevitable. The redemption is going to happen and Mashiach is going to prevail. And once the Rebbe said that he's already been anointed by above, the minui from David Malka Mashiach happened. There's no stopping. There's no way it's not going to happen. It's going to happen 100% without a shadow of a doubt. And we know who it is and what's going to happen. We know. But one of the tricks that has been created, one of the confusions, was whoever it was, it's not my business to find out, put out this notion, this idea that to believe that the Rebbe after Gimel Tammuz is Mashiach is Christianity, is a Christian belief. Because that's what the Christians believe about their so-called Messiah, that he's coming back in a second coming. And if that's the case, if Lubavitch believes after Gimel Tammuz the Rebbe is Mashiach, then it's a heretic belief. The nasty trick, and it worked. I have to say, it's a nasty, nasty trick, and it worked. It's simply not true. The problem with Jay, we don't say his name for whatever reason. The Christian Messiah, the problem with him is not second coming. The problem that makes it possible is not second coming. I would say something like this. The fact that the Christians believe in God, yeah, they have a Trinity, but they do believe in one, whatever they call him, Father, but whatever. That's not the belief of the pagans, the initial pagans, right? So that's like we'll say once they believe it, then it's now no more a Jewish belief to believe in one God. Obviously, it's ridiculous. It's the fact that Islam believes in monotheism, and that's a true. Now Judaism can't believe in it anymore. And let me ask you the question: the fact that the Christians believe in Mashiach in general, the Christians believe in Messiah. They have actually the ones promoted Messiah. We spoke about it all the time. So therefore, it's not a Jewish belief because the Christians believe in Messiah. They took the Messiah from the Jewish prophets and attributed it to whoever they thought it is, mistakenly thought that it is. It doesn't stop being Jewish. And if the Pope wears a skull cap, we don't call it. I don't want to call it the name that we have because that's a whole. So the Pope wears a skull cap, some kind of a right. Does that mean now that me wearing kippah is or a yarmulke is Christian? You must be, because look, the Pope wears it. That's insane. Just because Christianity has taken a concept and said that a second coming, that the reason Jay is not Mashiach is not because of a second coming, not because he passed away or he died. The reason he's not coming is Maimonides said because he destroyed the Jewish people. Because he destroyed the Jewish religion. Because when Mashiach is supposed to come, there has to be more observance, and there has to be the Jewish people have to come out of exile and out of suffering, and their honor and their has to rise in the world, and it has to become better for them materially and physically. It has to become unbelievably good for them, and through him, Maimonides says, we've suffered, we've been persecuted, we've brutally murdered. Who knows how many Jews were killed in the name of Jay, and how much suffering there's been, and how much, and he just I don't know exactly, I'm not familiar with Christianity, so I'm not going to talk anymore, but the general idea is that he did not promote Torah and mitzvahs and Judaism. That's not what happened. The concept that Mashiach could be someone even after he passed away is not Christianity. Now, you might say, is that the halachic, clear the halacha? There is debate. There is much to talk about that, which I'm not going to do right now. But I will definitely tell you that in the writings of the Zohar, and in the writings of the Ari, and in the writings of and the Abarbanel, and many others, which again, that was not the point of my class, so therefore I didn't prepare it, and I don't have such a memory that I can rattle you off all of it. But we could do a class on it, and I did discuss it other times. They definitely bring the possibility of someone coming from someone who has passed away already being Mashiach, and it does not, what's it called again, negate it's not against Judaism and it's not heretical. But because that idea was thrown out and it became such a taboo thing that therefore it became a sticky subject, therefore me bringing it up today is such a sticky subject. Because of this myth of Christianity. And that's not true, it's simply not true. So much so that there was a person, I don't know his name, but he wrote a book called Inyono Shel Moshiach, Chabadnik, who researched the subject and wrote an interesting book. called Inyono Shel Moshiach, in which this young man had corresponded with some, I'm not using names, I know the names, but I don't want to say, very, very prestigious Lithuanian Rabbanim, who in the early days rejected Lubavitch very strong because of their belief that the Rebbe could be Mashiach after Gimel Tammuz, and said that it's heresy and so on and so forth. He went and he researched the subject, and he sent them, this book is available, you can buy it, it's called Inyono Shel Moshiach, in which he researched. He didn't even send the finished book. He sent just some of his, I think, initial writings to them. And you know what? I hand it to them. I take that literally. I'm impressed, and I have a big respect for this rabbi. At least two of them. They sent them back a letter. They went through the subject. They said, "Listen, we came to such a conclusion erroneously, but you're right based on what you wrote and you showed us based on Jewish sources." You don't become a heretic if you believe so. Maybe I don't believe that Mashiach is so and so, but that doesn't make you a heretic by believing so. And therefore they retracted and they said that that we said on Chabad, that it's heretical belief, is wrong. So you can also, anybody that wants, look up that Sefer and go through the whole subject from a halachic perspective. But I do want to say it's very, very clear. The Medrash tells us regarding Mashiach that Mashiach is revealed, he is concealed, and he's revealed again. Nigla, he's revealed. Nichse, he's hidden, and he's revealed again. It goes through a process of revelation, concealment, and revelation. The Medrash is in Shir HaShirim, right? I think in the second chapter, or this Shir HaShirim. But over there it says that he's concealed for 45 days. Now we're talking about 30 so years, 28 years of concealment. So one can say that this whole concept of Mashiach being concealed is too long. Rashi in the book of Daniel, second to the last verse in Daniel. Perek Yud Beis, Pasuk Yud Beis. Ashrei Amachaka, fortunate are those who waited out. V'yagia. So Rashi gives a number. I don't want to say it on a YouTube because it's painful. Rashi gives an amount of time which is quite considerably longer than the time that has passed since the Rebbe has been hidden from us. Noisafim, here it says that how wonderful, how fortunate, how praised are those who will wait out the difficult years. So Rashi says it's a certain amount of years in addition to the previous calculation. Our Mashiach is going to be concealed after he's revealed. After he was revealed. The Yosha, the Yizgali will be revealed again. So we find in Medrash, okay, you can argue, what does concealed mean? Concealed means passing away, or concealed means he's hiding under the whatever. I don't know. I just know that the concept, the main idea is that where is he? What do you mean? What are you talking about? And he brings it from a Yoitzer, from one of the poetry that's written by Rabbi Eliezer HaKaler in Pashas HaChodesh. I looked it up yesterday, where it says over there that Mashiach will be considered, if it's concealed, Shvuayim Shisha. Actually, in the Yoitzer I saw it says Shvuayim Shiva. I don't know what that means. But there is. I was looking for a Yotzer with a Pirush, but I couldn't find it because in Chabad we don't say Yotzer. The special editions that we say, these special Shabbosim, 4 special Shabbosim. But in any case, there's clear indication Mashiach is revealed, he's concealed, and he's revealed now. Based on what the Rebbe himself said on Gimel Tammuz, there is a deep reason for this concealment. There's a very deep reason. The world needs to catch up. It has to be from the world. It can't be from him. He can, and again, I'm going to step back a second. Say this is an important idea. When we are talking about the Lubavitch Rebbe being Mashiach, we're not talking about a belief, about some, leader, spiritual leader that lives in a cave somewhere and has people running around with, barefoot with sandals and robes, and they sit there and they smoke and they bang on bangos. And we're following this creature, and there's some guy who's, who tells parables and he rolls his eyes and he's some kind of a spiritual guru or whatever, and that's the guy that we're saying is Mashiach. We're talking about the most prominent force in Judaism. The Rebbe who gave us thousands and thousands of hours of the deepest Torah in all aspects of Torah, in mysticism and revealed Torah, the person who took upon himself the responsibility for every single Jew across the planet, to reach every Jew, to nourish you, to help, not just responsibility for Jew, for every human being, the person who was out there concerned for the entire world, who never in the 40 years or so years that he was leader took a vacation one day, never even stayed home because he had a flu. Never. He had one time a heart attack, and even then he was talking and directing. The Rebbe was non-stop. A minute didn't stop. A genius. Someone who was off the charts, clearly like non-parallel. And he himself said what he said. And it says about Mashiach that he will be revealed, concealed, and revealed again. And we know that regarding Mashiach, who is a king, there needs to be, the Rebbe himself says at the Kabbolas Hamalchus, he can't tell us explicitly to do so. So what's the bottom line? What's the bottom line? Bottom line is that before the Rebbe's birthday, we reinitiated this circulating acceptance of kingship through a bonding letter where Chassidim would put their names and send. And I told you in the beginning that I took upon myself to watch the Rebbe's video every day. So as the exile is dragging, and so far we don't see an end to it, which doesn't make any sense. There was an inspiration, and we actually went out and spoke to many rabbis who very, very, very shockingly gave their endorsement to this type of a campaign, even though it had explicit mention of the Rebbe as Mashiach, and that he would take the Jewish people out of exile, which is something that most people were uncomfortable with over the last couple of years. And I wanted to say something, it's very important to understand. We watch, there's different factions in Lubavitch, those that are more pro something like this or not pro, and so on and so forth against it. It only makes perfect sense. And it's perfect legitimate, those that are for and those that are against. You realize there is so much here to support those that are against it. And there are so much here to support those that are for it. When the Rebbe, I believe from the beginning to end and going through a few ideas that I mentioned, then the conclusion is not on no, but on yeah. But it's not like anybody is maliciously bad or wrong or something. I'm just giving you the idea, the background of why the difficulty. But what's beautiful is that even those that till now were kind of whatever, something is shifting. I guess since the Geula has to come, there has to be a shift. And one of the things that, because we wonder, is this ever going to be successful? Are we going to be able to turn around the majority of Chabad? Are we going to be able to then take this to the rest of the world and start getting people to open their eyes and start appreciating and start changing and accepting something like that? And again, let's hope we don't have to do much more. But is it possible? And I say to myself, well, if Roe versus Wade could have been turned over in the United States after 50 years, close to 50 years, it would have been a complete 50 years, after you've given millions and millions of people a certain, what we might say, a license, and then to take away, we know how hard it is to take away a certain right. And that could be taken back. And another interesting thing, I thought there would be a bloody war. I thought literally the world would explode after Friday. I was literally afraid to stay in Los Angeles this Shabbos because I'm right over here in the middle of riot town. Gosh, I was scared who knows what could happen just a few years ago by the George Floyd riots. Who knows if the whole place, they could be running down the streets and start with religious places, because obviously it's, and miraculously, thank God, Baruch Hashem, everybody was safe and Hashem should continue. And there's a little, pushback, relatively very little. And if that could be reversed, could there not be a huge transformation? And let me explain, the reason why that was reversed is because that's the truth. Truth will prevail. Godliness will prevail. holiness will prevail. And Mashiach will prevail. As much as it sounds impossible that we're going to get the courage and the strength to be able to appreciate this, understand this. And see, here's the thing, even after you appreciate it, you understand it up here, emotionally it becomes so hard because there's the resistance, people will laugh at it, it's not popular, you sound like you're a kook, you're an extremist, all the stuff that are hard. And therefore what? Therefore Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Moshe, Aaron, David, Abraham, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, Rabbi Akiva, that's the 10 martyrs, the 6 million Jews, all the Jews, that's why everybody has to sit and wait because we're uncomfortable. Again, let me explain something. I'm not saying chas v'shalom. If this is true, if what I'm saying resonates, if it's true, and based I think that of what I've shared with you, at least to me it's true, I don't know. And again, I'm leaving out a lot because I can't speak to you for 8 hours, or you can't listen for 8 hours. But there's so much more to put in over here, which is so clear, and it's so convincing, and it's so compelling, that if it's true, then we have to consider maybe more needs to be done. That's the question. Not what wasn't done, but what should be done. And anybody that can study this, and again, the first call of action is that you should study the subject. Know that it is important. It's not that's not important. Who cares? No, it is important. It is important to know. And therefore, learn the subject. I have a book. I was going to bring it in just to show you the book. It's called Inyono Shel Moshiach, the idea of Mashiach, which is in such a clear way explains the entire worldview of the Rebbe and Hasidus, and with Mashiach at the core center of it in such a clear way. It's called Inyono. It's only written in Hebrew, and they're working on translating it to English, but so far it hasn't been done. Arm yourself with that information, study and learn. Maybe we can each have a little bit more of a schus, of a merit to be part and to help this facilitate. We know for sure Mashiach will win. Victory is going to happen. Mashiach will be king, and he will redeem the entire world. Maybe we can be a little bit more of a partner, and maybe it requires a little bravery, and maybe it requires a little bit thinking out of the box. And maybe it requires a little bit expansion and revisiting things that we thought are like, oh my, whatever. And I really apologize to the Rebbe, and I apologize to this because I feel I did not do justice to the subject. I realized that probably if I would have really put my mind, heart, and soul, I should have spent 2 weeks preparing this class and really being sharper, because I believe that this is so important. This is so vital. And it should have been, and it could be delivered and should be but for now, this was the best I could pull together, and let's hope that I did touch and inspire some people. I respect if people have different opinions than me. This is my opinion, but my opinion, which is in my mind so important that it's worth it for me to stick my neck out for this. And let's hope that I'm wrong in the sense that let's hope that Mashiach can we've done enough work to bring Mashiach, and we don't have to do in this particular area. Let's hope, and Mashiach just walks in right now. If there is chas v'shalom a little bit delay, perhaps maybe we should do a little bit more. I'm going to attach on the bottom of this video, not right now, but I'm going to attach a few links. One of the links that I'm going to attach is a link to the campaign, in which initially when we launched it, we got 3,000 signatures. 3,000 is not enough. I mean, let it be enough. Let's try to get 30,000. Let's try to get 300,000 people that are say to the Rebbe, we're your army, we're here. We know this truth. We are committed to listening to you, to be inspired by you, voted to be your subject. We don't just see you as a Rebbe, as an inspiration of the past, but the leader of the future. And we're signing up, and we're here. And we're yours, we're your melech. You're our melech, and we're your servants. So I will attach that. It's called United for Rebbe, United for the Rebbe. And over there, it has it in, you have to look, we still have to fix up the website. It has it in Hebrew and it has it in English. And in the bottom, you can add your name and you can take upon yourself a certain acceptance. But read it well, understand that it's a serious commitment and it's a lifetime commitment. It's not like you're committing yourself to be devoted and dedicated as a chassid. And it's between you and God and Mashiach. It's a serious thing. It's not something to joke around with. But let's do the best we can. And let's merit already before this Gimel Tammuz. Mashiach should be revealed. We should see him. We would rejoice in the third temple. And we should see the complete and total redemption. Take it from me, Mamish. Now. Let it be now. Thank you.